showing on the screen. Cool. There you go. All right, we're good to go. We're live.
Okay, we are live. So I'm going to call to order this special work session of the Lynn-Benton-Lincoln Education Service District Board of Directors for September 3rd, 2025. All right, so introductions, let's go ahead and start down. Nancy, we'll start with you and we'll just go around and introduce ourselves.
Nancy Griffith is the superintendent. Lori Greenfield, board representative for Zone 2.
I'm Denise Staffen, and I'm board rep for Zone 4.
Michael Thompson, board Zone 3.
Jason Hayes, superintendent.
Amy Vetter, board director, Zone 5, she, her.
He's Zone 1, first year.
Miriam Cummins, she, her, Aya, and I represent Zone 6.
Vince Adams, he, him, Oregon School Boards Association. Hi, Robert, cybersecurity technician.
All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I will hand the table to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
oh my goodness. Hi, everyone. I'm just so excited to be here because I know so many familiar faces in the room. And so, hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Vince Adams. I'm a board development specialist with the Oregon School Boards Association, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm a school board trainer. I came to this work honestly because I served 10 years on the Corvallis board. But I do have a master's degree in public policy. So I did governance. I actually did that work with the Extension Service. I was doing social demography with Oregon State University when I got elected to the Corvallis board. So I am a pretty wonky guy to do this stuff. You asked me to extol my professional history because I've been all over the place. I grew up about 2 hours from here in Winchester Bay. Anybody know where that is? Reedsport. I graduated from Reedsport High School in 1987.
Reedsport?
Yeah.
What?
For real.
Okay. Nice. Wow.
For real. For real. Yeah. My first job was baiting hooks on a salmon trawler when I was 14 years old. Next job was as a busboy, and then I got promoted to making pizzas, but I got fired from that job because I was too slow. Thank goodness. Let's see, what else have I done? Box boy at the grocery store. I worked for a radio station when I was in high school, KDUN. You're in tune with KDUN, the voice of Dune Country. KDUN, Reedsport. So, I mean, I actually did that stuff. But when I was in high school, it was the 80s, and my highest hope was to be a choker setter. Because back then, I was not a great student then. I actually graduated with 2.8 GPA. Not a good student. But, you know, I could make a living wage doing that work. Well, it was the 80s, and we know that didn't work out. So I ended up going in the Navy. I was a sonar technician, so hunted around. Have you ever seen Hunt for Red October? Yeah. So I did that type of work in the Navy. Found my passion, did oceanography and all that stuff. And got out. I thought I wanted to be a firefighter, but to be a professional firefighter, you need to be in an EMT. Ended up not being a firefighter. I did a volunteer firefighting, but ended up becoming a paramedic. I worked in Coos Bay with Bay City's ambulance for 6 years.
Wait, when was that?
That was the 90s.
Because I'm from Coos Bay.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'm from Coos Bay.
You were a kid then.
Well, that's why I said like years, because I was in elementary school starting 1996.
Well, this would have been 1994 to 2000.
See? Oh my gosh, we were in the same city.
There you go.
What?
threw away that job, because I thought I wanted to make more money. I ended up, I was turning wrenches at Mount Bachelor as a lift mechanic. Did that technical stuff, which is what I was doing in the Navy. But that got me into a job managing an event rental company, in Bend. Did that, managed that business, but you only get one chance to screw up someone's wedding, so it was a really high-stakes job. Just did not like the stress of that work, and so I gave that up. Ended up getting hired back to the ambulance company because they had a medical supply business, managed that business, and in a fit of depression, my wife asked me, if you could do anything that you wanted, and money wasn't an option, what would you do? I never thought like that before, and I was like, I want to be a whale biologist. I want to tag whales, and I want to be in a Zodiac boat out in the ocean. What I ended up doing was going back to school. I was actually, did my undergrad at Southwestern Oregon Community College, then went on to here at Oregon State University. That's how I ended up here in the heart of the valley. I was in an ecology lab doing ecology, which was what I thought I wanted to do. It's a great dress code, but there was too many of us. It was really hard to find a job. So I took that hard left turn into public policy. Now, I realized that, we don't really have environmental problems. The environment has people problems. It's about how we make decisions. And that's what kind of led me to this policy work. I landed a job with OSU Extension. I ran the Rural Communities Explorer, providing demographic, social, and economic indicators for all communities in Oregon, supporting local government and nonprofit folks doing community development. And then, the rest of the story. That's how I got here. So, I've been teaching this course all summer long, and I'm really pumped to share it with you. It's good. We're going to go back to basics. But the big thing that I want to leave you with is that this is not my opinion of how school board works or how board governance works. This is what the education science has taught us. So you'll hear a little bit of my opinion because I've done this work, and so I have opinions about how to do it. This is a workshop. I'm a recovering extension agent, so you are always welcome to interrupt if you have a question or if I say something that makes you angry. Feel free to stop me, and we can work it out. I have no idea what's on the next slide.
Tyro, can he just touch the screen too?
I think so, actually, yeah. Try it.
No.
Wow. Oh, no.
Here, it's okay. I got it remote.
Oh, there.
Oh, we already did introductions. Where did you? Oh, but I do want to know. We already did it, but I want to know where you went to high school. I also want to know what you like cooking or eating in fall, and I want to know why you're on this board. Please.
Okay, so
I'm going to grab a chair.
name, Miriam Cummins, Chief Heredia. I've been on the board for 6 years. I started in 2019. I went to Marshville High School. That's where I graduated.
Yeah, go Pirates.
That's why I said, once a pirate, always a pirate. And why am I on this board? One, I'm a believer in advocacy, and my children were actually the ones that motivated me to be a voice, not just for them, but for all students and for marginalized communities, and to voices be uplifted and advocated. And I'm a special education advocate and champion because my son, who's in the spectrum, and just want to make sure he gets the education and students get the education tailored for them. So that's my reason and my,
Thank you. Bill, take it away.
I went to Harold L. Richards High School in Oakland, Illinois, in the south side of Chicago. And came out to Oregon in the early 80s for an internship, and came back in 85. And had a career as a United Methodist pastor here in Oregon and Idaho for 30+ years. And here back to Albany to be close to the grandbabies, and that's the kind of work. So I did my variety of things. I delivered mail in Lebanon for 3 years. I picked up bodies for a funeral home at night on call. That was very educational. I didn't want to do that much longer than I did. I worked in an accounting office for an insurance trust in Salem for 2 years as a accounts payable, and then a school bus, but all while serving church part-time in Jefferson. And I retired and wanted to be involved, and learned about LBL through being a special ed bus driver, and going, what is it? And it's such a stealth thing to me. And I learned about it, and this is super cool. The history of LBL, well, ESD across Oregon was a very interesting history, and someone says, well, I was going to be over the board position. I think about running, and there's a guy saying, they don't need another old white guy. But I ran, and sure enough.
Awesome.
I did it for folks that don't have a voice, perhaps.
Great story. Thank you, Bill.
I've been on the board for 4 years, almost exactly 4 years now. And I went to high school at Glencoe in Hillsborough. And my favorite, you said favorite thing to cook, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. We'll double back.
Okay. The other day, I like to cook and bake. The other day, because I have ripe plums right now in my backyard, we have some fruit trees.
Me
I made
too.
a plum galette. It was like a rustic pie sort of a thing. It was really yummy, and I'm going to eat some more of it tonight when I go home. It was really good. It was like a mix of tart and sweet plums. And then I'm on the board just because it feels like a material way to just make a difference, a positive impact on your community, because it's so easy to just get caught up in the stress of like what's happening on a national scale or stuff like that, but really what we need is people making a positive difference on the local level, and I felt like this was a way in which I could do it. And also I got the nudge from somebody who was like, I think you'd be good at this. And so, like, because I might not have, because I applied to a vacancy, and was appointed to an open spot, and I may not have done that if I didn't get that encouragement, and so that's why I'm on the board.
Awesome. Okay, Bill, what do you like eating or cooking?
I make a combination of my mother and my aunt's dressing for Thanksgiving every fall. It's the sausage. Favorite thing to eat in fall.
Perfect.
All right, for me, it has to be tamales and pozole. Like, I go Mexican, all in it. It's like culture, okay? It's like, I love, tamales, I love eating it, not so much making it, okay? Because it's like 5 hours of intense labor. But pozole, I beat my mom's pozole, and that's on record. Because even we had a competition, and my brothers voted, and they liked mine better.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's me.
Okay. No, Jason, we'll do staff too.
Okay.
How'd you get here?
How did I get here? I guess first of all, where did I go to high school? I graduated from Osseo High School in Osseo, Minnesota, which is a small town that got engulfed by suburbs in northwest Minneapolis area. I came to Oregon in 1999, and I was an elementary school teacher and a building administrator and a curriculum director. I went off for a couple of years and was a superintendent of a small school district, and then ended up here primarily, and I'll just give credit where credit is due, is that Tanya Everest was a phenomenal leader, and it was one of those things where the work of the ESD is incredibly important. It resonates for me because of family connections to special education and just serving the more marginalized groups that we serve. But also is just new and different, and I was at a point in my career where there weren't too many people that I was willing to work for. And I really respected Tanya, and I had no problem working for her. I might have looked for a superintendent job somewhere else if it was. I don't know if this is, but I was assistant superintendent for a chunk of time. And then she retired too soon, and here I am, and they're stuck with me for a little while.
I was really angry too.
Yeah, I know, it was really disappointing. It was like, you're messing with my plans, Tanya. I like being a superintendent, but I also like being superintendent too, so. Yeah, cooking. Hands down, my favorite fall recipe is, a nod, thinking of culture, is my Minnesota culture of wild rice soup.
Oh.
You know, so whenever I get a chance to go back, and actually ended up with about 3 pounds of wild rice that was harvested by a friend of my sister's, and oh, you have wild rice in a bucket back there? Do you want some rice? I'm like, yeah, I do. So there you go. That's my favorite.
Awesome.
Okay. I went to Fort Vancouver High School. I grew up in Vancouver, Washington. I was appointed in like March of 2024, following the passing of Frank Fricker. Now, when I spent 4 years on the Greater Albany School Board, and Frank had just left the board as I got on, but I talked to him a lot during that time. I learned a lot from him, so I felt it was appropriate on his passing to step in his spot. I enjoyed my time with the K through 12. You know, it was tumultuous. But so at the time, you know, my wife and I, both my wife's on city boards and commissions. I've been on the city board. I'm currently the Albany City Councilman. So service is very important to me. This is just part of it. But particularly schools, enjoying my time, and so she came open, I jumped at it. My daughter was spent some time at Dixie School, early childhood programs with the LBL. So I mean, I'm somewhat familiar, and I've just been more learning since then. But just part of among other volunteer organizations in the city, part of my service, I think. So, and I don't really have anything fall, you know, thinking seasonally eat. I do. This is wet hop season in the craft brew industry, so I look forward to some type of
Right
wet
there
hop.
with you.
Yeah.
I believe Block 15 is releasing their, that's this Friday.
I knew it was coming, and I love block.
Like, I'm right there with you.
Yay, okay, so Denise, so I just started on the board, right? So not even a year yet. Yeah, just starting out as a board member. And I grew up in Antigua, it's a tiny Caribbean island. I actually spent all of my childhood and some of my young adulthood in Antigua. I moved to the U.S. I was like in my 20s by the time I moved. So, you know, I still consider myself very, you know. So,
What does education look like in Antigua?
It's based more so on the British system, you know, so we have schools, but then you go to primary school, and then you go to secondary school, and then you do A-levels. So I did A-levels. And my high school was called Princess Margaret Secondary. And I went to, it was considered a pretty large high school. It's a tiny island, right? So all large, you know, like take that with a grain of salt in terms of what large would mean. And in terms of my education, because after I went through schooling at home, I went to A-levels, and then I actually started in agriculture. So I went to another island called Trinidad, and they have, I guess, well, considered like a community college, you know, by U.S. standards. So I did a program there in agriculture, and then I worked in extension, and I worked specifically in radio. Yeah.
We should get together and talk.
I used to do a program that was called Agriculture in Action. And so I would go out and I would interview farmers and kind of talk about, you know, like what's happening in the agricultural world. And so I did that. And then I came to the U.S. To Missouri, of all places. Knew nothing about Missouri because in Antigua, when people talk about coming to the U.S., it's New York, or maybe Florida, right? But, yeah, but Missouri, I mean, but I was just happy for an opportunity. I went to a historical black college, Lincoln University, and my bachelor's is in agriculture. And then I did a master's. So from Missouri, I went to Ohio, did a master's in international studies. Also did my PhD in education. And then I went back and did a master's in early intervention. So, in terms of just my education, and why am I on the board? I'm always interested in education. I think growing up, I always felt as though I wanted to make an impact. I just was never sure about how, but education really fascinated me because it was something that most people, at least when you think about K-12, would have gone through, especially in terms of public education. And so I felt as though, especially in terms of, like wellness, community development, and things like that, that these are some of the things that education could provide and produce. So I've always been active, very much so in my community. I had been asked before about being on a school board, and I always said no, because I did not want to go through an election. But somehow, the opportunity to be on this board, I think something shifted for me where I felt ready to be a part of a board. It felt like the time was right. I felt like I could really make a difference. I felt as though there's a lot going on in our world, and that I would like to have a voice in terms of some of those things that were going on. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. So it's a good avenue to contribute to my community and to also be involved with others in making change, right? And then there was a question about cooking. So I'm very, I'm one of those people where my mood really determines a lot of things. So there are things that I enjoy cooking today, and then if I'm not feeling in that mood, I may not enjoy it as much. I like cooking food from my home, so things that are generally Caribbean. So I love things like jerk chicken, for example. I like things like stewed, what we call the salted fish. I like that. But I also enjoy things from my husband's culture. And so my husband is Cameroonian. And right now I think what I really like cooking is there's this thing, it's called beignet. Not to be confused with the beignet from Louisiana, but it's similar, it's just not as, so I really enjoy that because it's somehow in between, like, his culture and my culture. Yeah, and so I like that. I think one of the things I've been enjoying is making, like, juices. So one of my kiddos got interested in creating a business, and we wanted to make drinks and sell. And so he and I have made what we call ginger beer together. And so whenever we make it, I think back of home. And we also have another drink called sorrel. I think Mexicans call it Jamaica.
Jamaica, I'm gonna
I love making that because at least the way we make it, like, because of all the different herbs and stuff you put in it, oh my gosh, how it smells so great. So
I would like to try that.
Yeah. All right, Lori.
another newbie on the board.
Great.
So this is a fresh board.
Mm-hmm.
I went to St. Vincent's Academy for Girls in Savannah as a nice Jewish girl. It was just a really interesting experience. I had been a very good student through elementary school. In my last 2 years, I was bused from my neighborhood school that we could see the corner of the playground area from my front yard, and I was bused across town. And busing was in place, but it was not functioning. My older sister had been on split shifts. I mean, they just didn't move people around well, and I got lost in 7th grade. When I got off the bus, I was even a little smaller than I am now, and it was a 7th through 12th grade campus adjacent to the junior high and high school, and I had to walk through literally a gauntlet of drug dealers who had like on muscle shirts and had hair in their armpits, and I'm this little kid, you know. Anyway, I went from being a straight A student to, by the 3rd quarter of the year, I was so disaffected with not being a person in the classroom and bored, because I was bored. I got caught skipping school, and then I got a D on my report card, and my parents flipped out. So the next year, they put me in, we weren't rich, and so they put me in a private school for 1 year, but it only went to 8th grade, and then all the Jewish girls who were not rich and who were districted to go someplace that was hard to, that had not righted itself, went to St. Vincent's Academy. So there was a group of us there. I loved my busing experience in elementary. It was wonderful. I got a white face, and there's all my friends got my pictures around it, and I was like one of 3 white faces, and it was just a really cool experience, you know. I really loved it, and the principal and I became really good friends. And my teacher, my 5th grade teacher, in Savannah, I had pretty dark skin because it was Savannah, and I didn't know for the entire year that Mrs. Sears was considered black until after I was riding my bike by her house because she lived in my neighborhood, and I said, I didn't know because her husband came out or something. I said, I didn't know your husband was black. And she goes, what do you think I am? I could tell lots of stories about all that. Why I'm on the board, I'm a retired career educator, did a bunch of things. I have appreciated what the ESD has done for me personally as an educator, and then in my role as principal for all the people that I was serving and working with, and then on up the ladder, and my arm got twisted a little bit too to join the board. But I thought it was important I live in Alsea, and and I taught there for 10 years, and then after my career out in the valley, I went back and spent 5 years during a very tumultuous time, kind of helping do stuff, and
Thank you.
I saw how important the services the ESD remained, you know, for rural districts, and so I want to be a voice for that, and I want to be a person here who supports education.
I could write a whole case study on how ESD is pivotal in supporting policy.
date, starting from 1994, when I got my first job there.
But in that particular instance,
Yeah.
because I was the trainer working with the board over the last 3 years.
Oh,
Anyway,
just the last 3 years?
yep,
Okay.
we could tell stories,
Yes.
but.
Oh, food, yeah. You gotta tell my food. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right, food.
Yeah, well, I love to cook, and I cook, and it's one of my creative things. But my husband and I, in the fall, we love when winter squash come in. And we grow a lot of winter squash normally. I like to just cut it in half and put it down on a pan and put it in the oven at 400 until it's squishy, and then all those sugars come out. And
Mhm.
and we eat a lot of it all winter long. I have a root cellar. I store them all in there. I eat my winter squash through May.
Yeah. Hey, Nancy, take us home.
Okay, and I went to high school at Regis High School in Staten, class 87.
Okay.
Oh.
Hey.
Have a degree in biology. So I taught math and science. And then I was an administrator at secondary level and then a district office administrator, and then I got hired here. Worked very closely with Lori. And then however long Jason's been superintendent, I've been the assistant superintendent, so.
Awesome.
Couple years.
Couple years.
Yeah.
And Safeway sells the Killer's winter squash soup.
Yum.
Shut up, cook.
So Lori, you and I are really close on favorite things to cook. So my favorite thing is it's pumpkin stuff with all that is good. And we always do it with the Cinderella pumpkin.
Oh.
And it's just cheese, heavy cream, and bread in chunks. You put it in, and you put it in the oven, and you cook it until it collapses under its own weight.
Oh.
Same sort of thing that you were talking about. Oh my God, it's so good. Anyway, okay. Why, we have spent 35 minutes on this slide. Why do you think I did that?
We can get to know each other.
Why? Yeah, that's true. Why?
Well, we are establishing a relationship as a board
Mm-hmm.
and a connection and learning about each other. We're building trust.
Yeah, why is that important?
Work together.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to work together, but, I mean, and, let's be frank, I mean, compared to school districts, ESD work is a little, you're in calmer waters, let's just say.
Very true.
Isn't that lovely? It's the best.
You guys kind of fly under the radar. People don't, I mean, it's like, if you ask someone what an ESD is, education service, what's that? They don't even know. Nevertheless, it's still board work. It's not if, it's when the hard times will come. They will come. There will be hard things that you'll have to do. Connecting, and boards, usually what we do is we walk in the door, and then we gavel into the meeting, and we make some votes, and then we gavel out, and we go home. And we don't connect with each other and talk about growing up in Savannah, Antigua, and connecting as people helps us when we're not necessarily seeing eye to eye on an issue, and we're chewing on stuff. And to be able to connect with each other. Also, I'm listening to your why are you on the board? So that's a diagnostic question for me. And I mean, I wasn't worried when walking in the door. I know why most of you are here already, so. Yeah, but thank you. And I will urge you to take time to have conversations like this on a fairly regular basis, every year or every couple times a year. Stop and talk about your why. Why do you do this work? Why the heck did you do this to yourself? I can say that because I did it to myself. Like 3 times I did it to myself. There's a complete lapses in judgment there.
So
Okay.
do you suggest then, like during our board retreat, to kind of have maybe an item in our agenda to talk about, like, questions like this, like how we're doing as a board individually, so we can share something personal, or?
Yeah, be intentional about it. You know, it can be, I mean, I use food because everybody connects to food. I mean, so, yeah, but I mean, talk about your why, for sure, yeah. Okay. Okay, let's see, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, perfect. So, I've got pairs. We're gonna go really quick. I want you to pair up, so Nancy and Lori, Denise and Michael, Amy, and Miriam. You guys are gonna think that, and I want in 3 minutes. Wow, that's out of sequence. Anyway, what we'll do is I will actually key in what you, but I want you to think of like 3 to 5 things that are the board's top strengths and your areas of growth. How much time do you think you need? Took a lot of time talking, so I'm going to say 5 minutes. Is 5 minutes enough? Okay. So I'm going to put a 5-minute timer on, and I want you guys to talk, and then we'll debrief it, and I'm going to key it into the slide. Okay. Timer. 5, 0. Go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing that.
Like, and that was one thing, I think, just, I think,
Conversely, we don't have. We don't know. Yeah.
I think another one is just because everybody thinks that
Areas of growth and learning, right, the entire organization.
What do you think about your
We all really care, like, we all have a heart for education, or I feel like we're all just the right people. We serve because of the mission.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that is.
We care about, Absolutely, no, 100% agree with that. I think that would be, I'm super excited about that.
Sure.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, even beyond, right, even beyond, learning about these, you're just learning what it means to be.
And that's one thing that I would say, with the board, the process is
Yeah.
and so I do say that having that experience has got.
Yeah, I think those are good.
Whether it's like.
And I think everybody has it.
Coming to it.
How is this one?
For the mission.
We didn't have that.
Who else, right?
What led to the growth and areas of improvement.
Yeah, like,
For us.
we don't have to.
Would be. Maybe learning more.
I always use
what
one
that looks like.
He's really,
Well, like, it's just,
I remind himself.
It's frustrating.
Um,
Don't go, it's just.
And
different.
Yeah, I don't mind him making himself free. But the thing is, like, I relate to it. I am that same way, and it took a long time. To learn how to do that myself.
You know,
Hopefully, I can help him a little.
Yeah, totally.
how we fit in the bigger scheme of, we're part of the whole education system.
Okay, about 45 seconds. Get those final thoughts.
Yeah, I think exactly.
Yeah, I think the funny
Challenges of maybe more better.
every year.
Right, coming on back. That's time. So it's time. I'm sure that you have good stuff. So this is a quick and dirty self-assessment is what it is. You know, we do a very technical self-assessment, but just trying to see where you're at. So let's start with strengths, and then we'll come back around for areas of growth. So anybody like, we'll go popcorn style, so which group will want to go first?
Well, I thought a strength is the number of educators who work, in either the K-12 or for the ESD itself that are on.
So let's say K-12 background.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then you said you had that at all also?
Yes.
So if we have extras, if you want to second that, we'll put an asterisk on.
Diversity of experience.
Of
We have the word, we have the diverse board, so same thing.
yeah, so let's put an asterisk on that.
Also had, like a willingness to kind of work together, like for the good of the agent.
I'm going to say positive intent.
Okay,
That's good.
that works.
You don't have to assume it, and got it. Love that.
The equity lens that the board has worked on, part of my coming on. Emergency about it, and inclusivity. Picked up from the staff to ultimately serve.
We mentioned that too, care deeply about equity.
Yep.
So I could say equity focus.
Yes. And also focusing on the work culture here, because like I was sharing with Bill, is I used to work here and I left because of the work culture. And coming back as in the board, I wanted to make sure there was something changed. And so now I feel like from what we have heard from staff, that it's a work culture now that we are able to retain staff. And now I have a lot of staff leave.
How does that relate to the board?
Well, because we support our administrators and our superintendent and the work that we want to make sure that it's focused agency-wise and that our staff feel that they belong here and that they're appreciated. And one of the things we did was staff appreciation. And so coming from the board, the staff that feels like we have the support not only from our administrators but from the board. So I think that's how it trickles down.
So I captured that as board expects a positive workplace culture. I'm not gonna put the board in. That's my Grammarly, fixing my grammar.
We talked about that, collection of people that have a learning or a growth mindset.
Growth mindset, I love that. Talk about learning organization.
As with so many new folks on here, we're bringing fresh ideas.
Ooh, I love that. Fresh ideas. What are we missing?
I also discussed about the workplace culture, kind of thinking about that. Another thing that I'm thinking about is so many of us also have had like a personal experience with
Ooh.
Yeah, Denise actually was one of the educators that was with my son when he was a baby, so, yeah.
Great. Good. Okay.
We had one.
Oh, yeah.
One more,
Bring it.
that, a heart for education and a strong why. And they talked about why, that everybody, here for the right reasons, they might be slightly different, but there's alignment stuff.
I love it because I can't teach that.
Yeah.
I can teach you the technical stuff. Yeah, but I can't teach you that.
Somebody to be there for the right reason. That would be a tough one.
I don't encounter it very often, but that's, okay. So where do you need to grow?
that with so many of us in you.
Yeah, it's a young board.
Yeah. So like really learning just about some of those borders, like rules and
Governance.
yeah, like
That one too.
yeah.
Understanding and building knowledge around governance.
An experience.
Inexperience. Here, I'm just gonna put a couple asterisks.
Always have to revisit what does it mean to show mutual respect and what does it look like? So, how we do it.
Even if your views or opinions, or it might be different from what you believe in, respecting it.
We can disagree respectfully.
Yeah.
One of the things sort of related to that, that Amy and I talked about, is an area of growth is building a team. Both having, and then this is another one that's related to, I think they kind of go together, but building a strong board team, but then also building a strong board, like superintendent relationship or board executive relationship. Also, the team, the board team, and then you have the board executive team.
We're gonna talk about leadership team here in just a little bit.
Wrote down collaboration, but that kind of all goes with that, learning to collaborate and gaining trust.
At the conference, in one of the sessions for the area meetups at the end of the day, it was very illuminating to me. There was folks from along with LC, Sweet Home, I was there, for ballot, and then just some of the ways that they're feeling frustration with gaps in service, especially in our rural areas. You know, around language, foreign language, the arts, theater, the opportunities, and I struggle with it. Like, one of those is some old to the back of the, that's the question, how do we get that kind of access in our region?
Diverse region. Seriously, man, I totally resonate that. I sit on the Community Action Advisory Council for Community Services Consortium that serves the same region of it is. It's a really heterogeneous.
But for me being in the room with those people, like, I gotta make sure I get into those rooms.
Yeah.
Hear their frustration. I was uncomfortable. So I can. Just sure.
I mean, because not a lot of people understand about the ESD.
Yeah.
And so, and one of the things we started doing is having our open house to have a community. So, but it's like, I know we can do more, but how? Because what else can you do? Yeah.
Anything else? All great stuff, and all achievable stuff. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this back on. Grab my remote, take off the glasses, and, okay, now we can start the program.
All right.
That was all for you. What are we gonna do? We're gonna talk about roles and responsibilities. What is it that boards do, or what is it that high-performing boards do that have positive impacts on kids? Everything I'm going to talk about is about having positive impacts on kids. Well, I'll talk briefly about having negative impacts on kids too, but we're not going to focus on that. Everything I do, every day, I get up in the morning, so when I go to sleep at night, I'm always thinking about how can school boards or how governing boards can have positive impacts on kids. That's what I do. I just so happen to work with boards to do that. But that's really fundamentally what this is all about. We're going to talk about balanced governance standards. Balanced governance is a theoretical framework. It's what we use at OSBA Board Development to organize our training and the way we think. It's a theoretical framework around board governance that positively impacts kids. And then we're going to do a bunch of scenarios, and then we'll wrap up with how can OSBA help you, the sales part, okay? And then we'll talk about next steps. And then, if we have time permitting, we'll play Stump the Trainer, and you can ask me anything. Okay?
Anything.
Okay? Here we go. So, no, we didn't do this. Oh, yes, no, this is important. Why does the board matter? Why do we do it this way? Because goodness knows, it's not the most efficient way to do it, to run an organization. Huh?
Public oversight.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, ESD you are a public entity, and so you are accountable to the public. So we elect folks to hold that public entity accountable. Sure, yeah. Why else?
Have a large impact on the direction of the district or ESD.
Yeah, profoundly.
I want to reiterate what Jason said about representation, because you talked about how diverse our area of service is. And we're missing the person from the coast. So, I mean, it's a big, diverse area, and we literally are here representing different
Regions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It already jumped out at me as I was running. Not everybody across the board, LBL, both were my zone, so I had constituents that felt that.
Mm-hmm.
They were responsible for that group.
Yeah.
Which represents 4 school districts.
Yeah. Don't have representation. You talked about culture. Why does the board matter to things like workplace culture?
Because we need to have a because if we didn't have a board, let's say at the ESD, and we have staff, it would feel like there would be no direction. And having a board to kind of guide the agency on the expectations, on the quality of work. Now we have this standard where it's like, oh, we do have a board that can then guide the work culture and the support, so we can then do our work and support our students. So we need that level of guidance to be able to function as an agency. Like you do this in an opposite company, you need a board. You need to know what the direction is of the agency to go. So that's what I think.
Yeah, you set the tone.
Yeah, what you just said, I was gonna add to what Miriam so well said is the board sets the tone. And I think the other part that I think really matters, and as much as we have some pretty stable leadership in terms of administrative leadership at the ESD, and I certainly want that to continue, I think in general, boards matter because it creates continuity for a community that wouldn't otherwise be there. You know, you think about the average tenure of a superintendent is less than 3 years.
Yep.
And that's, you know, really kind of frightening when you think about it. If an organization only got its tone from one person that's only there for 2.5 or 2.7 years or whatever it is, things would bounce around and change a lot.
Jason's gonna be here longer than that.
Yeah. I'm already, this year, I will get past the average already, and I want to be here longer, but I think that's something that has hit me.
But to your point, board behavior influences superintendent tenure.
And
Absolutely.
we see that in other districts where
Absolutely.
when the board is not functioning collectively, collaboratively, we see a dysfunction within the school district.
Yeah.
And, you know, and
Absolutely.
so.
Or in the
And-
most extreme cases, we see an exodus.
Yes.
Absolutely. And what ends up happening, and we've seen it over and over, is it actually carries on for years and years because you have a really hard time recruiting a superintendent. You know, there's very few superintendents.
Yes.
It's both costs more and
You have to
doesn't
build,
function as well.
because now you have to build the trust within the community too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And you guys are channeling this horrible saying that around school board, if the school board gets it wrong that night, it's in classrooms the next day, right? But we know that the opposite is true. That if the school board gets it right that night, it's in classrooms the next day. And where we see high-functioning boards, we see longer executive and administrative tenure. And we see cultivation of higher levels of skilled staff.
And can I say,
Yeah?
this, you'll understand what I'm talking about here. We, as a board, need to be educated and know our role so that we can function to guide. I know you were saying that, but if we aren't functioning together as a board, we can have leadership that can set the tone in a way that may not necessarily represent the constituents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We already talked about that. How about this one? Why does he let me talk about this, but let's get a little more. Why does that matter? Why is the relationship with your superintendent?
because he's the only employee that the board, manages, and so it's important to have that relationship, because the superintendent is also the face of this, district, or agency. So we're like in the back, but really Jason is the front, and it's important to support him, because he's in a way representing us,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why it's important to have that relationship.
Delivering all
Yes.
Yep.
that. We can set the tone, but we don't execute it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
There it
It's
is.
about implementation of what direction you set.
Absolutely. Consulted with a board earlier this year that lost their superintendent. I remember they were in a meeting, and a board member says, well, we should have the communication director send out this notice, and the board chair had to stop them and say, can't do that, because because under policy BVA, we cannot direct any member of the staff to action. They didn't have a superintendent, they didn't have an acting, they were dead in the water, there was nothing they could do. It's like King Arthur without Excalibur. Or a school board or a board without its superintendent is just a group of frustrated people because they can't get anything done. What else is here? We already talked about this. You are the interface between the community and the institution of the school, of the service district. That means you are bringing community you are community representation. You are the community. So you're bringing community into the leadership of the institution. You're also a shock absorber. Jason and his staff have work that they need to do that's important. Their attention should be focused on kids. And so there is going to be times when you're going to need to take the hits. We do not want angry people slapping the hoods of teachers' cars. Bring that anger into the boardroom. Don't take it to my staff.
And we need to learn how to not take it personally then. Because that's something I'm working on.
Yep.
But it's like, how do we then be the safety net, that cushion, because it's, you know, in the heat of a moment, it hurts, you know, like it feels like it's being directed at you. So how do we, but, you know, like how can, what are some tips on how to be that safety cushion?
I've got a whole slide now
Okay.
on how to do that.
Okay, don't scare me like that, because I was like, oh my God.
I'm prepared.
All right.
It's okay. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. And you're in an ESD. Paul and I did that. Okay. Do we believe this?
Yes.
Can every child learn?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Every child can show growth, yeah?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Now, understand the slide is calibrated for school districts, but walk with me.
But we support it.
Can every child succeed?
Yes.
Who defines success? Yeah.
Looks different for everyone.
Yeah, that's it.
And but there's some legal parameters to that as well.
Division.
Yeah. State defines some of that.
Mm-hmm.
In a school district, there are graduation requirements that are set by the school board. So there's different aspects to that, but I really appreciate that you immediately went to the kid, the family. It's not just us, but you guys are also defining what success looks like for a kid. Is a GED success for a kid?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I think sometimes with society and even in the governmental and state standards is, like, I personally don't like a lot of the benchmarks or because then you're putting all the students in the same caliber. And for me, success is every child is on their own growth, and we should celebrate and see how that child has exceeded and growth within them. And I just think about my own kids and how I don't want a state benchmark to indicate whether my child is on track or not. And again, this is my personal opinion, because I feel like every child has their own success and how they're moving forward and growing, both educationally and personally. So to me, it's like, that's why I said every child should be able to define their own success, because everybody learns differently at their own pace.
This is a conversation that the board should have. What does success look like? The most consequential things that you'll do. How about this one? We can predict student outcomes by social factors. Not what we want.
No.
It's almost a silly question in this room. But I go other places, and this is a revolutionary idea. But yeah, we don't want to be able to look at the color of a kid's skin, or their gender, or whatever.
Well, then you're already now putting the child in a stereotypical framework. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay. We go back. Now, I understand this is more of a school district parameter, but you are getting kids, through a post-secondary credential. What % of students not graduating is acceptable for this board? done. Oh, yeah.
Ideally, I mean, it's not a perfect world, but we want every kid to be able to graduate, ideally.
Is GED considered graduation?
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Or a modified diploma.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So that
Okay.
depends on how you define.
How you define graduating.
Graduating.
I'm being intentionally provocative by putting graduating up there. You're right.
And I think any way you look at it, though, that, there should be some curiosity around it, right? So, you know, if a student isn't graduating to a particular pathway, for example, you need to think about what, you know, why not?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why is that happening? Yeah. Can we support, you know, whatever it is?
But if we substitute graduating with success, and we kind of generally define success as a secondary credential with a plan for post-secondary life, can we all agree on that? What's the percentage? What's the acceptable failure rate in that?
Improving trend.
An improving trend, is that good enough?
You have to start with what you have right now, and how can we get better, and can we do it in bigger ways? That number, percentage of all the ways that are described for success. Not right.
But would you agree that the terminal goal would be to reach 100%?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Very idealistic in a good way.
So this is, the reason I'm beating on this is because it's consequential. The single belief that all students can and will learn what you guys are articulating is important, because as soon as we accept something less than 100%, we govern differently. If we say 98% is good enough, that means we're gonna fail 2%. And then you ask, well, which 2%?
Which 2%?
Which kids are you gonna let go?
And what's the impact on our lives? Oh, and what's the impact on their lives, the lives of the 2%?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you passed the test, good job. Not everybody does. Okay, so let's start talking technical stuff. I'm gonna talk at you for a little bit, okay? So when I say the leadership team, this is what I mean. First, we have a board. You provide authority, direction, and oversight. You get your authority from the legislature. In law that says, thou shalt be a board, and you have the authority to govern the district, right? You have a superintendent who provides leadership, most importantly, expertise. You have a teaching and learning guy. So he provides instructional leadership and puts your direction into action, okay? Next piece is that you have an administrative professional. Now where is she? She's
on vacation.
yeah, but she's in Kentucky or? Tennessee.
Yep.
So, and bless her heart, she replied to my email.
And you replied to my text message today when you realized that, everything just happened so smooth when Lisa's here, and then I'm like, where are the name tags?
So, but, I mean, when we think about the leadership team for this district, your administrative professional is in there as well, and they provide coordination, compliance and continuity. Oftentimes, it's the administrative professional that's been there the longest. Superintendents come and go, and so do boards. But it's the administrative professional that knows where the bodies are hid. And might have put a couple of them there, okay? So, super important person. And it's a hard position to be in, because they're an employee of the district. They work for the superintendent, but they have this really pivotal role working with this volunteer board. It's a really tricky position to be in, and they're really, really important. So at the intersection of these, with board and superintendent, this is overall district leadership. We have one body that's performing legislative functions, creating policy, and giving direction, the other that's implementing that. Next, we have the governing body operations, School boards run on an ocean of paper. Now, that paper is mostly virtual today, but, I mean, we used to have giant binders of policy and all this stuff. So, yeah, between the board and the clerk, that's all the machinations of doing our board meeting. We have to make that happen, okay? And then down here, we have executive functions. This guy's whole job is to make decisions. He needs to know where to be to learn to do those things, and he needs someone to tell him where to be, okay? That's crucially important, allows him to have higher order thinking. In the center here, we have overall leadership advocacy. So when we start having a weakness in any one of these three legs of the stool, you can see that the leadership team starts to fall off. We lose our leadership efficacy. So when you think about leadership team, don't think about just board or board superintendent. Think about all three of these components. And when I say leadership team, this is what I'm talking about. Question?
No, well, you got me in suspense, because I kept waiting for the leadership efficacy. I was like, what is this?
Leadership efficacy. Okay. So this is well, I already gave you the pitch on this. So this is if the board gets it wrong that evening, it's in classrooms the next day. You guys get this implicitly. How each of you shows up impacts your board culture, and how you guys function, that affects organizational culture, and it ultimately gets to your kids. This is actually a regression model. They actually took data and regressed it, and they can actually predict student outcomes.
So where in that is staff?
That's,
Because staff is that the organizational culture?
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if individual board, it only takes a few board members to blow board culture, and then it finally finds its way into organizational culture.
And then it's
Yep. Doesn't take much. This is actually a fairly fragile system.
Easy to break and very hard to fix.
Yes. So this is actually a dated slide that we need to update it because there's more research. But this is a timeline of the research that connects board behavior and practice to student outcomes. Those of us who've been doing this for a little while, we remember the lighthouse inquiries. This is actually how I learned school board stuff. I don't know, Michael, have you been doing this long enough that you remember lighthouse?
Well, it's been talked about many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I started, that was referenced back.
Yeah, and this was like revolutionary. I mean, so they were at Iowa State. So Mary Delagardelle was a PhD candidate at Iowa State, and Tom Alsbury was her advisor. Don't click on the thing. Tom Alsbury was her advisor. They had this really groundbreaking question. If we apply training to school boards, will they change their behavior and practices, and does that impact student outcomes? So they created, can you believe it, 24 hours of training. That was how long the program. Can you imagine carving out 24 hours over a couple of years? Anyway, it was nuts. Anyway, they provided this training, and sure enough, boards changed, did what they did, and that had impacts on kids. They replicated it in Montana and Texas, found the same outcome. Eventually, they brought it to Oregon. Oregon was one of the research states. That was about the time, that was, the early 2000s, 2010, 2012, they were doing this work. Right when I stumbled onto the Core Balance Board 2013, they were kind of wrapping up. And Lighthouse was all the rage back then. Since then, I mean, we've done so much more. So Tom has gone on to do balanced governance. Ivan Lorenzen, where is he? He's at Texas Association of School Boards. And then Phil Gore is actually our colleague over in Idaho. He runs Idaho. So anyway, this has been a growing body of research, and it's still ongoing. We'll talk about a little bit of research that my office did. But let's break this down into what the research actually says. So across the top are a few articles here. There's Lighthouse, Mary Delagardelle, and Tom Alsbury. Johnson, I forget his name. And this is DeBergson O'Brien. This is National School Boards Association article that was done in 2016, eight essential qualities of effective school board, something like that. But I want to draw your attention all the way to the left-hand side of the screen. And so if these are the things, if we do these things, we're going to have positive impacts on kids. And Mary, I think you were the one that said it. We set the vision for what's possible for our kids, setting a culture of high expectations and a vision of high expectations that our kids can and will achieve. This is going to happen, okay? Climate and resources, this is about, in terms of Lighthouse, it was building conditions for success. Anybody know tree farmers? Anybody know a tree farmer? A couple people. Tree farmers are interesting people. They don't think in terms of years or even decades. They think in terms of generations. I'm planting trees today that my grandkids will harvest. I won't be alive. So school boarding or doing board work is kind of like that. We're building conditions for success today that we may not be in office to actually see it. Some of this work takes time for it to unfold, okay? Climate and resources. Climate is also about culture, creating a sense of urgency around improvements for our kids. Completely maintain that consistent, gentle pressure on the district to keep doing the work, inspiring them to do the work, that it is possible. Because let's face it, it's hard day to day, and particularly with an ESD, you're dealing with some tough kids with really big challenges, okay? That can get demoralizing. And so having a board that's inspired to do this work, creating that sense of urgency is really important in aligning and sustaining resources to do it.
Well, I think also part of that is because generations come, it's really different, you know? So I know, like, when I grew up, the generation I grew up, I'm a millennial, to today's generation with technology. So I think as a board, we also have to assess the evolution and acceptance of the generations and how they learn. Because just because we learned it one way doesn't make it that this generation is going to learn it the same way. So being mindful in the growth and evolution.
Yeah, and education is really matured. I mean, K-12 education has been professionalizing since, what, the 60s? Pretty earnestly. It's pretty much an evidence-based process at this point. School boarding, we're just now starting to get to that, okay? But we're kind of catching up to these guys. Because this is just they know what the education science is. Okay. Next one is data and monitoring. I mean, prior to No Child Left Behind, it was acceptable for a governing board in education to not look at disaggregated data. Today is an accepted norm that you will be data savvy. You will be monitoring progress using student data. You should have that expectation. It should be flowing into your boardroom on a regular basis, okay? Cohesive teaming, this is a fancy academic term for what the board is doing right now. It's meeting, practicing, I think it's even on here, unified governance, building shared beliefs and values, what we were doing, okay? Building shared beliefs and values of what's put upon, and learning together as a team. And when I see team, a leadership team, a whole team.
Will we have access to this slideshow?
Yes, you will.
Awesome.
Okay, good. So like,
Yeah, just take any highlight notes. You're going to get all of this. Next one is community engagement. Roundly, one of your jobs is bringing community into your governance, building public will to succeed. That's in the terms of Lighthouse, but engaging community and building that collaborative relationship. Because let's face it, expectations on K-12 education have fundamentally shifted. When we graduated in 1987, a 70% graduation rate was success. Check. Because, at least in Oregon, there was a place for people to go to work. Remember, I wanted to be a choker center? That was still a viable dream in 1986. Today, if a kid doesn't graduate from high school with some sort of credential, they will struggle to find success in the 21st century economy. The expectations on K-12 education have fundamentally shifted, okay?
Well, even in college, like now you have to have like a master's or a PhD in certain jobs. Like everything has increased education-wise.
And it's dramatically more expensive too.
So yeah, building those collaborative relationships, to do this work, we have to do it in partnership. We're bringing public health and mental health into our schools. We have to do that to reach these kids that were the biggest challenges. Policy and accountability, that's how we operationalize our governance. Board meets once a month. In the intervening 29 days, your superintendent needs to know what you expect. And so your policy is like a message in a bottle. Superintendents read policy at 11 o'clock at night when something's going wrong. I mean, that's, you know, when things are hard, that's when they turn to your message to them. It's like, what do they expect on this particular thing? Or what does the law expect? Because, anyway, policy.
That's a good question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, from all these different research, you know, around board and effectiveness, are there any studies that kind of deal specifically, especially with like ESD? Maybe that you notice in particular for ESD, blah, blah, blah.
Sadly, not many
Not yet.
of it. I haven't read any.
Okay.
You know, I think in academia, I'm just like the public, you know, education service districts fly under the radar. It's not enough, or they're just not aware. That said, these concepts are highly transferable.
Yeah, so ubiquitous.
I mean, you can take these concepts and map that over to city council. I bet I could even go to the legislature and teach this.
Would you?
But I mean, yeah, these are universal. I mean, if I would just have to change the vocabulary. But I mean, the one thing that's nice about education is that we're focused on one thing, very narrow in our focus. We're getting kids to have a secondary credential and a plan for post-secondary life, right? That's the goal. If I'm working on the city council or I'm on the county commission, those bodies do lots of different stuff. I gotta build roads, I gotta make water, I gotta deal with sewer, I gotta deal with law enforcement, all kinds of stuff going on there. So,
And we're kind of in the middle, because we have.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, we do a lot of services, you know, a solid half of what we do is indirect to students.
mhm.
It service districts, technology and business and software, and yeah, there's a lot of things that, you know, of course, there's a through line to kids, but it's not a direct.
Yeah.
And
Right,
that's what I.
so we're in the middle land of
Yeah.
that looks like.
Yep.
And that's what I wonder about, because ESD tends to be a little bit, unless you're receiving like ESD services or something like that, right? But generally speaking, it tends to be a little bit more indirect. So
Mhm.
that's why I wonder if things like, you know, the role of partnership,
Mhm.
right? Like, yeah, but anyway, I just wonder.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, we're talking about metric, you know, it goes back to data and monitoring.
Mhm.
If you have a vision and you set goals, what does success look like, and you're tracking your progress,
Mhm.
doesn't really matter.
And these things are all universal for business.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I think that's been a big part of my development during the last five and a half years, is that I've learned more about running a business than, you know, I spent the first part of my career running the school system and didn't really think about the business aspect in the same way. Of course, a budget and whatnot, but this is an education business. And those things all, I think about all the business leadership books that I've read over the years, all of those things. Right in line with it. Solid business has everything.
And I mean, I look at the room, you guys are all engaged people. I mean, you're probably on multiple boards or in different leadership positions. All this stuff, highly transferable. I sit on two nonprofit boards, use this stuff all the time.
I think one thing for me that I would like to see more, especially when it's more ESD focused, is when we're looking at data, because we don't really look at graduation rates, right? Because we're in ESD, we look at, so what kind of data then as an ESD, and I'm hoping as more people and legislature and everything's more aware of the services that we do, that what is it that we can able to establish statewide as an, ESDs, including all of them, on what the training for new board members looks like when we're looking at data. What kind of data are we looking at? Because then I feel like that would give more of a sense and guidance to help our new board, and also as a refresher for instance, but I've always wondered, where can we get more tailored data information on what that ESD actually looks at when it comes to data? Because it's completely different from school districts.
I would love to partner with OBSA, because all y'all are the experts.
I feel like the superintendents would have a lot to say because they're looking at data. And, whatever training they're getting, whatever kind of superintendent, you're looking at data. Now, you're right, there's different sets of data that you look at here because it could be your, technology.
Services different.
Yeah, whatever. But there, with a good relationship with the superintendent and the trust and all that, there should be some training from the superintendent. Here is our data that we're looking at, and this is what we're seeing, and that we can then learn from. I'm not trying to say we should all be under the complete sway of our superintendent, but I feel like that's a good place to get information. That's that technical and expertise that.
Exactly, we can't do our job effectively without that expertise, which, the superintendent provides.
I think it was what you mentioned in terms of data and understanding of data. I think to generally, at least I'll speak for myself, as a new board member, understanding how these things transfer over to ESD specifically, because when I think about community engagement, right, from a K-12 perspective, I'm thinking more about families and, and students. But from an ESD perspective, yes, it includes that, and also all these other partners that we have as well.
Probably your primary community are your constituent superintendents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With the exception of, so we have a direct pathway to students and families through EIECSD. That is the only part that we have a direct. The rest of it is all with districts. Yep, district superintendents, and schools. So if we look at the district's part of it, and then we look at how do we get information and feedback from our schools.
And I think, Bill, when we were starting out, you talked about sitting in those regional meetings and hearing the struggles of small districts in the region and getting that perspective. So as board members, yeah, you should be out meeting with your constituent board members, getting those stories.
Question for me, our role and authority, or sorry, use certain word, are we more of a consulting body than for the districts we serve, collaborate with, and get them to collaborate with each other? Where they can certainly throw obstacles, so are we in a sales position to try and see the benefit, collaborate with us on how we can do that in an efficient way?
There's
From my
a component of that.
Yeah, from my perspective, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that I've learned in the past years here that I think is an interesting piece if we think about governance, and this is actually very scripted and laid out with our local service plan in terms of governance, but in a more loose structure. Our regional superintendents and our board members of our component school districts are basically like the board to this board. Like if we think about how you as a board direct the work for me to do and everything else, when it comes to services and when it comes to looking at the local service plan, their direction, what their needs are in school districts, direct what we do. We want, and there's an evolution of what the needs are that are there.
Then add to that the complexity of the LBL region, where you have a few couple larger districts with their needs and their priorities that they're willing to pay for.
Yep.
Versus a whole bunch of smaller districts that desperately need you.
Yep.
So balancing, satisfying the big district, because you gotta have them.
Yep. It's very, very different, and that's probably the biggest balancing act I think about in terms of data and accountability. That is probably my biggest worry, you know, and is that we would have one of our larger districts or a couple of our larger districts that go the way of what Salem did, you know, in the WESD region at some point, what Portland Public has done, you know, it's like that they've taken their money out and said, we're gonna do this ourselves, and now the economy of scale goes away, and all of a sudden everything's more expensive for the smaller districts, and that is the balancing act of making sure things are relevant for all the different districts that we have.
Am I wrong that Corvallis doesn't, years ago, Corvallis did provided a lot of their services, not using the ESD.
They're fully part of our,
Okay.
our service plan.
And that's not
And
by accident.
We actually don't, we don't have any of the districts in our region that have full service.
And there were conversations about that, but we made an intentional decision not to do that because we knew the impact would be on the region.
In particular, I think when Corvallis passed the local option, there were aspects of it that I'm sure that Corvallis could have done other things on their own. Not everything, because there's some parts, but yeah, that's the challenge with it.
And I think for also maintaining that balance, right, is how can we be equitable with our school districts? The bigger districts are able to afford, you know, at a higher rate because they have the funding versus rural. So when we are providing services, we have to look at what can we do to provide services for that region that is also not going to break their bank, especially in rural areas.
Yeah.
And so like one thing that I thought about is like, oh my gosh, I don't want a bigger district to say like, oh, you know, this smaller rural like Sam Canyon is paying this much and we're paying a lot more. Why is that not, you know, that's not fair. But it's like, we have to look through our equity lens. That is why we have an equity lens. And making sure that's the mindset that our districts can understand why bigger districts are able to afford versus rural areas that don't have the same level of funding.
And I think that adding to what you said, Vince, earlier, I think is really important in terms of the top line there, creating that vision and having the collaboration with our superintendent and with our other boards to not go that way. And one of the things that I saw very clearly when I started as assistant superintendent more than 5 years ago is that we had leaders, and Corvallis is a great example. You know, I look at Ryan Noss as superintendent, he's in his 10th year as superintendent there, which is a phenomenal run for any superintendent. He talks about how, like, it is imperative that Corvallis plays nice in the sandbox and that Albany plays nice in the sandbox as it relates to taking care of the smaller districts. Because if they only looked at what their needs were, then the smaller districts would get better.
And that was a conversation he had before.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard him talk about that.
Are you seeing this when you're meeting with all the superintendents, this sort of happening?
I think that, yes, all of these are very much elements of being successful and having a And I think that part of it is building the relationships with each of them, so that's a huge part of my job, is building the relationships with each of them so that they feel satisfied with what they're getting, knowing that they're probably not going to get, it's like any sort of compromise, they're not going to get all of what they want, because they're going to have to be able to give and allow for somebody else to get what they want. Yeah, but having a collective vision, and in particular having, for the larger districts, so for Lebanon, Gaps, Corvallis, and Lincoln County, for those 4 districts, in particular, to have superintendents that actually care about the smaller districts is huge. I think that's probably the biggest marker of us continuing along this way, because the superintendents drive this plan.
I would say that the LBL superintendents have done a really good job collaborating and coming together and being strong leaders. Yeah, anyway, we could go down that route.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We talked about policy and accountability. Okay, so this is the positive side of the coin. Okay, but there's research on the other side. So, practices associated with negative impacts on student outcomes. Obviously, if your meetings are less orderly, you don't have a well-organized meeting, that you're having sprawling conversations, you're not efficient with your time. Of course, respectful engagement, no throwing binders at each other. Okay. I love this next one. They literally have grad students with stopwatches watching videos of school boards, and they look at how much time you spend talking about kids. Commonsensically, boards that spend more time talking about the needs of children tend to have better outcomes. Go figure.
You get more of what you pay attention to.
Yeah. Members seek to advance their own agendas, so, again, that positive intent. So I'm here, this is a stepping stone to a higher office, that sort of thing. Less effective working relationships, less reliance on the administrator for advice and input. There is no expectation that anybody on an ESD or school board has any training in pedagogy, in pedagogy, school administration, or indeed school governance. You don't know the job until you put your butt in the seat and actually start doing it. That's why I have a job. Thank goodness. Okay? So, yeah, your superintendent is chief advisor to the board. Let's focus on policy items. We talked about that. That's how you operationalize your governance. Only vaguely aware of district improvement initiatives. So this is where I introduce the idea of informed oversight. We'll talk about that in a little more detail, what that is. But that's where we want to be. And so you should know what your district team is working on. Particularly if you've allocated resources to it, you should be tracking the progress of those initiatives. Making excuses, and there's lots of them. We like to, hit on the unions. Oh, man, teachers, they went on, cabs went on strike. And we got to rein the teachers, we'll have student success if we can rein in the teachers union. Or, I tell this one with school districts, parents, we can blame the parents, they won't come to curriculum night. They don't even know what the ESD is. They won't engage. What do we have to do? We have to give them margaritas to show up and Bob Pizza. They still won't show up. Okay? So, if we could get parents to engage, then we'd have it. But, they don't care. Sometimes it's, I get this from rural districts. Well, what would you expect? We're a tiny little rural district. We can't provide the programs those big districts can. So our kids just aren't going to achieve. They've literally said that to me, like making excuses. I'll tell you a story. This is an older story. There was annual convention 2014. Katie Haycock was the keynote speaker at OSBA annual convention. I was a newly minted school board member. I was also, at the time, I was a social scientist and talking, with extension. I thought it was really cool. I I was on the school board and the social scientists at Oregon State University. Wow, really cool. Anyway, went to annual convention and heard Katie Haycock give this speech, and she talked about Robert Mason Elementary School in Mobile, Alabama. You can go on your phone and look it up. It's still there. School's still there. And it's in a really tough neighborhood. It wasn't then, and it still is. Primarily black, lots of crime, substandard housing, drugs. You can visualize this neighborhood in your mind's eye. And for years, it had been in the bottom of the distribution of student scores. So a few years before Katie told the story, the principal went into early retirement, and over the course of the summer, all the staff turned over. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, the kids in Robert Mason Elementary School went from the bottom of the distribution to the top. Now, what had changed? It wasn't the kids. Literally, some of the kids were still in the building. What had changed were the adult expectations of the adults in the building. So, and school is still the same, still there. So it can happen. But what had gone on is that the school board, they would wring their hands. It took that big transformation. It wasn't until they actually did something that actually, had the change. And that for years they had made excuses. Someone said, well, look at the neighborhood. What would you expect of those kids? So when I heard the story, it hit pretty hard because 2 weeks prior, I had been in retreat with my own school board, and I had said these words, because I was doing the social demography. I said, we need to be mindful of the socioeconomic status of the children that are coming to us. I was the board member who made the excuse. Kids are poor. Kids are home. Easy to do. We don't get to make excuses. It can happen. Robert Mason Elementary School, and there are examples here in Oregon where we've seen transformative change. I mean, even next door, Corvallis achieved parity with Latino kids. We graduate Latino kids at the same rate that we do. That's because we focused on it. It can happen. You don't get to make excuses. No one's coming to save you. Oregon Department of Education already tapped out. Legislature doesn't get it. I went on record saying that. They're getting better. They are getting better. They're starting to hear the message. But I mean, it's good, we're literally transforming education while we're trying to do it. But we don't get to make excuses. Buck stops with you guys.
So how do we implement that level of model, right? For instance, what Corvallis is doing with having the Latino, Latinx students, graduate at the same rate as the white students, because there would be the community then will come up and say, oh, well, that's taking resources away from these other students. So how do you put a message out there that that's not the case? Because those are conversations, especially in today's demographic, being transparent, those conversations are still happening and they have been happening.
Two things. Denise hit on one of them. She said you have to be curious. You have to look at the chart and go, I suspect kids are not performing at the same rate as everybody else. Why not? You have to be curious. The other is you have to be courageous. Corvallis School Board's getting its butt kicked about math curriculum right now. People are really, really upset because they have done some very progressive stuff around math education, and they're taking hits for it.
I saw, an article from OBSA that said that Corvallis failed their equity. What is that? I was trying to understand what that meant.
You should talk to a Corvallis School Board member.
Okay.
Actually, and that's coming out of an executive session, so there's privileged information there,
Okay.
so.
And you could watch the video.
The video, okay.
Yeah, you could watch it.
But, yeah. I do not know the details of that because I was not in the executive session. So, I don't think they did. I mean, the Corvallis board is very focused on it.
Yeah.
So, where were we? Excuses. Don't make excuses. Micromanagement. We'll talk about micromanagement. Staff don't know the board. You will know you're doing well as a board when your staff want to report to you. Even better, when they tell you stories about how they tried something and it didn't work out, and they share with you what they learned. When you get that, you know you're doing it. You've earned their trust. They know that you have their back. That they're going to say, we got this grant and I tried this thing and it totally train wrecked, but the kids loved it and we learned this and we're going to try this new thing. That's where you want to be. Yeah, we want to rely on data for doing our work. Whew, we are really conversational because I'm running late. It's really good. It's good. It's been a great session. Okay. I want you to visualize. I grew up on the coast, so I use maritime metaphors. I want you to visualize your ESD as a cruise ship, okay? And you have a captain, Captain Hay. Bonus points if you get him a captain hat when I come back. Margaritas for everybody. Okay.
Probably going to take margaritas when you put it on.
But he's in charge of navigation engineering. He is literally, school is starting. He's navigating the ship out of the harbor right now, okay? And we're doing, districts all over the state are doing this. But housekeeping, maintenance, food service, and, entertainment, crew and staff, all of this, he's responsible for all of that, okay? With me? Or you're in charge of this. You commission the journey. You say, Captain Hang, take us to the island of Student Success Paradise, where every kid is, graduating, whatever that looks like, with a plan for post-secondary. You set the destination of where you're going to go, and you set the intermediate goals. We're not at 100%. We're not going to be anytime real soon, but we're going to have these goals, these ports of call along the way that we're going to take. Okay? At all time, we're relying on our maritime professional because does anybody know how to, run a cruise ship? Me either. I don't. And there's another way to think about this. When was the last time you climbed up in the cockpit of an airliner and told the pilot how to fly the plane?
Unless you want to get kicked out.
Just let me. Story to tell later.
These days they actually block the door so you can't do that. But we don't. Now that doesn't mean that we don't have expectations. If I bought an airline ticket to Honolulu, Hawaii, because I'm going on vacation, I sure as heck better end up in Honolulu, right? And anybody been on a flight where they have the little, the little screen on the back seat, and it tells you, it's just what your altitude and your cruising speed, your time of arrival and all that. Well, that's just tracking data, right? We do the same thing with districts, right? It's a data dashboard, and we're tracking our kids, how they're doing. It's the same stuff. And when you land, how many of you looked at the pilot and said, hey, nice landing?
No.
You never have?
Well, because they're inside the cockpit when they get out. So
You've never been on a flight where they come out and they're in their uniform with their epaulets and pilots because they're all cool and they're all standing there going,
I did it.
The landing was really rough, and then they came behind the door.
Or the landing where you came down in a thunderstorm and it's like the plane did this to get down and you're like, you say, hey, thanks for getting this on the ground alive. That's evaluation. So different ways of thinking. So it doesn't mean, we're going on a flight, right? So it's another way to think about it. Let's see. Nuts and bolts slide. I don't really like this. Governance. We operational our governance through policy. The superintendent, you have administrative rules, ARs, for you new board members. They're called ARs or administrative rules. that's in operational language, so taking and interpreting that policy in terms so staff know what they're actually supposed to do, okay? You adopt the budget, but your superintendent is gonna roll up those expenditures and match them with revenue, okay? Program adoptions, but, you know, you're gonna have, your superintendent and staff implementing those. Curriculum, I'm assuming you guys approve curriculum, I didn't look that up.
Not really.
Does it?
No, it
But you're probably
not the same
adopting,
as a K-12.
but you're probably approving, programs and things like that?
There's some things, there's some,
Okay.
yeah, there's some preschool
And
types
some,
of things.
like evaluation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's not quite the same, like that doesn't ever hit the board, in the ESD in the same way as like the board would adopt like a reading curriculum for K-12 district.
Is there saying, so on the governance and policy, so the board is policy?
That is correct.
Okay.
It
And
is.
then management is, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we get guidance from OSBA, because they're the ones that are, you know, we rely on them when the legislature says, hey, now all school districts have to do all this, so then OSBA is like, hey, you should implement this, because now it's required, or this is optional.
Yeah,
So then we review it, and then we pass it.
and you should review it to make sure that it fits your district
Yeah.
and your region. Do not rubber stamp OSBA policy. I know that Spencer Lewis is gonna be angry with me for saying this. But, I mean, I used to be on a handsy board that we definitely would tinker with policy, and you should. You should look at it, make sure that it fits your district, and if you're gonna make changes, engage OSBA and
Say,
send it back
I
to them.
will, if the board ever wants to tinker with policy, that's all fine and good. Just know that your superintendent will always push and say, we're going to have some lawyers look at this before we adopt this.
And-
Exactly.
And you have lawyers at OSBA that will look at it.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And we've done that many, many times, where,
Yep.
like, hey, what if we do this?
That's why that's one of the reasons why we exist. So we have policy analysts and attorneys to look at policy. Community engagement, note that it says community engagement on both sides. And so Jason, I'm gonna look to you, what are the statutorily required things where you have to go out and interact with? Because you're doing stuff with special ed, and I know that there are some statutory
Yeah, so there's
requirements.
some special ed engagement that needs to happen in terms of child fines, like that. But primarily, when we look at community engagement, it's kind of going to the part that we talked about before, is that our primary constituent that we engage with are the school district.
Yep.
So, in terms of community engagement on the governance, on the board side, is something that Bill has started doing already, and I know that other people have done this already as well. And our plans of it so far is going out to district board meetings and engaging with other boards that we represent. I do the same thing. Nancy and I split up the list and go to every single component district board meeting. And then on the management side of things, it's all about connection with our superintendents, ed directors, our business directors, our technology directors. It's that engagement. Make sure that we're doing what they.
Good stuff. And then there's tracking, so, you know, your district team is gonna be providing you data and information on progress on whatever it is that you're working on, and you're staying in a state of informed oversight. Okay? Oh, I love this one. So, you have a big job to do. You have to govern the public entity for this service district, okay? But ultimately, this is what we're aiming at. We're trying to improve student outcomes, so that's why the D8 CAT is pointed this way and there. So before I jump in here, the length of the lever is analogous to impact on kids. So longer the lever, the more impact. So the number one most important thing that you do is hire and evaluate your superintendent. And when I say evaluate, I don't want you to think about it in terms of putting your thumb on and pushing down. When I say evaluate or accountability, Accountability is more about making a commitment to walking together and doing the work. Much better. I mean, we've probably all been in employment situations where we had a thumb pressing down on us. How'd that feel? Yeah. But we probably also had professional relationships where our boss was walking with us and doing the work. Super important as a school board or a governing board that you're doing that. And you're doing that, you have 7 positions. Again, the superintendent needs 1 boss, not 7. Okay, this is crucially important. Probably the most highest impact thing that you can do. Next is developing and adopting policy. Because when you're not there, the superintendent needs to know what to do, what you expect. So developing policy, not just for compliance, but also for setting a vision of where you want to go, where do you want the district. Next is tracking district progress, having the conversation about your kids. Remember, boards that talk about their kids tend to have better outcomes, and that's where this comes in. You should be tracking progress. How are your kids doing? Next is improving the budget. The reality is, and this might be a little bit different for you folks because you're working with other districts to get your funding figured out, but I mean, the reality is K-12 funding is kind of on rails. It is. As a Measure 5 and Measure 4. And down here is ministerial functions of the board. This is looking at the check register or the toilet paper contract or whatever it is. I'm not saying that those things aren't important. They are. But the lever's not very big. It's not going to have a lot of impact on kids. You do need to be fiscally responsible. We need to set that expectation. But it's like, get it done and then move on and get back to talking about kids. Because that's where the bang happens. Okay?
I do have a question on the first one around hire and evaluate the superintendent. Are there any, I guess, like guidelines, best practices around like different approaches, you know, to that?
Yes,
Okay.
there are. There are many, actually. But COSA, which is the Coalition of School Administrators, our sister organization that represents superintendents and school administrators, partnered with Oregon School Boards Association to develop a superintendent evaluation workbook and framework. And that's what the service that we provide and what we use. It is evidence-based, uses 8 standards, evidence-based standards, things that superintendents do that have positive impacts on kids, unsurprisingly. It's about positive impacts on kids. So that's what we have you evaluate them on. It's really hard. You have a trained professional educator and chief executive, and we have a board comprised of people. You just so happen to have some folks with K-12 education, but there's no expectation that you do. It's really an artificial and difficult task for a board to evaluate a superintendent. Yeah.
Especially when those questions are so tailored to school districts and not so much the ESD, that we do have to tailor some of our evaluations to reflect the agency.
Absolutely.
And also for hiring, there's guidance for hiring.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we do search services, but there's other private search services out there as well. I'm very proud of the services that we provide, but you don't have to worry about them. I'm not. Okay, balanced governance. This is all about informed oversight. And this is, balanced governance, Tom has kind of posited these things on spectrums. And so on one side of this spectrum, we have the disengaged board, the rubber stamp board. Whatever the superintendent brings in, we're just going to say, yeah. We're not going to be curious about it. We're not going to ask hard questions. The other side is the overreaching or micromanaging board. We're showing up unannounced in schools and here's and checking on morale and how education's going. That's not okay either. We don't want to be there, right? We want to be in this sweet spot called informed oversight, where, who said it? Think tank. The board acting as a think tank or into, you know, helping the superintendent leadership team, and when I say the district team, in doing, you know, implementing education and initiatives. Information is flowing into the boardroom. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go out to your sites and visit, but you're going to do that mediated through your superintendent. So board members have, we have a socially constructed image of what they are. I mean, we think that they have magic wands and can fix things miraculously and have a lot of power. Also, educators get very, very anxious when board members are there evaluating things. And so our presence can be very disruptive. And so we have to be very careful in the way that we show up. We also need to be mindful in the way we speak. And especially now because we're on TV. We're on TV right now. And so, and of course, I shoot my mouth off and say horrible things. And hasn't caught up with me yet, and I'm sure it will.
You're still in the game.
I think with this balance, because, you know, some of us are parents, and
Yeah.
we have students that are in the component districts that we serve, and
Yeah.
also I've been on meetings where I've had an IEP down for my child, and staff from the ESD are there. And so I always start by saying, I'm not here as a school board member, I'm here as a parent, because I want to advocate for my child as a parent. So it's like, I always have to put in a disclaimer at every meeting or email that I send out, because of that implication of, I don't want there to be an imbalance of power, you
Right.
could say. And so I do say, I'm here advocating for my child as a parent, not as a school board member. And I'm like, whatever I say is because I'm advocating. Don't take it personal. I'm just a parent.
Right.
And so that's one thing I do to not overstep or utilize that power dynamic when it comes to us being in a leadership position.
And even when we do that, which what you just described is a best practice, and when we do, you always want to disarm the situation, but you never get to take the hat off. It's always on. The grocery store, on Facebook, wherever you go, in the parent-teaching conference, that hat is on. Goodness, I rotated off the board, and a year afterwards, people were still treating me like a school board member, and I wasn't even in office.
You can do it as well, like Mary, what you said is so right on. And you can do it as well as you can, and it's still, there's still an impact.
Still there.
I felt that being an administrator in Greater Albany for a lot of years, and my kids were there, and you don't get to go to a parent-teacher conference. Don't take off your hat.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you do.
But it's also a gift too, because as you learn this stuff, you learn the jargon, you learn the concept, you learn the education science, and you can nerd out with people. It's really cool. But informed oversight, so that's the state that we want to be in. We're always striving to be in this state of informed oversight. We're not giving it away free. We're going to ask hard questions, because that's how these guys get better. We're checking their blind spots. That's why we were elected. But we're going to trust our aviation or maritime professional to fly the plane or drive the ship. Okay?
My question around that is always, like, how do you know what you've done?
That is hard. I guess the answer to that question is to ask dumb questions. There are no dumb questions. There is no such thing.
I mean, I say that because, you know, like I think about my experience with other boards. Well, not with me being a board member, right? But where, like maybe I've approached a board member as a parent to talk about a particular situation, and they're like, no, we don't want to talk about that. You know, we don't want to hear this, what's happening with you because of whatever, some other implications of listening to a parent, right? But if they're only listening to what their superintendent is saying, then they don't actually know That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Who
so
are you
where's
hearing?
that?
So then
Yeah.
you can ask the question, who have we not heard from? This is why we have equity lens.
Okay.
So we ask, it's scripted for us. Yeah, who have we not heard from in this decision process? And you can ask the superintendent, you know, in the preparation for this, who has district staff not heard from?
I want to clarify what you're saying. So had you gone through the channels of communicating, asking your questions maybe first to the teacher or to the, gone through those steps?
Yeah. Yeah. There's I guess I won't necessarily anticipate something like that happening here, but I think what the board member was afraid of is, for example, so if, like, I filed a complaint, because I spoke to this board member, it means that they may not get to sit in on the discussion about.
Your question, we're gonna address your question.
Yeah,
I got slides for that.
okay.
You're talking about complaints.
Well, but I mean, but in, you know, kind of like, but if you have to be aware of that, then you may not be aware then of everything that's happening, and that could also
Yeah.
impact your governance and,
So judicial processes are kind of a special place.
yeah.
And there are parameters to what we can know versus governance of district operations. That's a different conversation. We have much more latitude on the questions that we can ask in that environment, in the governance one. In a judicial process, there are guardrails that we have to observe. Okay. So let's talk about standards. So how do we organize all this stuff? Because we talked about, you know, all these different things. So this is the framework that we use. So all the training that we do is organized within the balanced governance standards. So everything I've been talking about is in standard 11. We'll get to it instead. So we've been just talking about that one particular standard, but there's a lot more that you do have impacts on kids. So you'll notice some symmetry from we were looking at research articles earlier. So you'll notice some symmetry, vision-directed planning. There's like at the top of the list in the other one too. So setting a clear, shared, and student-focused vision, okay? Engagement, we talked about that earlier too. So these are holdovers. Effective leadership, and so establishing focused direction and expectations that foster student learning. Is that one about, talking about the needs of kids, making sure that that's what's happening in the boardroom. One is accountability. But having high expectations in learning for every student, that value that the board has already articulated, and having goals that are measurable and monitored. Accountability. Accountability is about walking together. That's how we operationalize that. By setting goals and having tracking metrics so that we can walk together, so we can have a conversation about that and be curious about why there are disparities and how we're going to address that. Going right hand in hand with 4 and 5 can actually be squished together, I think, but they're not, they're separate. Using data for continuous improvement. So actually looking at quant data about literally academic outcomes, but it's not just that. We're also looking at qualitative data. The student experience is important. What's the qualitative experience of going to school? New ones for, this is new stuff here, is cultural responsiveness. The reality is if we're going to reach each and every kid, we're going to have to meet them where they're at. That's going to be different for each and every kiddo. That requires us to be culturally responsive, not just staff, in our boardroom too. We have to figure out what cultural responsive governance looks like.
And also that goes with respecting each other's you know, identity, but also the experience that we bring and honoring that.
Valuing differences and
Yeah.
just respecting them.
Yeah, so that's not only that we do as an agency, but within our own board.
And this is new. No one's got this figured out yet. I mean, particularly here in the States.
I wonder about, because when we talk about cultural responsiveness, there's also, or maybe, it's implied that cultural humility, right? But there's also that aspect
Yes, ma'am.
around that as well.
I think I don't think we can be culturally responsive if we don't approach this work with humility. I mean, how could you? I mean, yeah, so absolutely. Culture and climate, and this is really about organizational culture, is what's intended here, creating a climate of expectations all students can learn. It's baked into the culture of organization, that's the way we're gonna do it. That reaction, that gut reaction that you guys had, that's what this is. Ooh, learning organization. This is a new standard that we, guess what? You're leading a learning organization. And there's an approach to doing that, ensuring that district functions as a self-renewing professional community. That we're learning together, that the board is learning from district staff. These guys are doing really technical stuff. And we need to learn how to do that. We should be oscillating back and forth from our governance mode. That's the one that we're most comfortable with, the gavel in. And then we say, I move to blah, blah, blah. That's your governance mode. You're making decisions. But then there's this receptive mode where we're students of our staff and they're teaching us about education, learning organization, cultivating this, and ensuring that that culture is going all the way down into the classroom, whatever that looks like for an ESD.
Well, that also supports staff retention as well.
Yeah.
Because staff feels valued, they stay.
Yeah.
And so I think for us as a board, the fact that we have also made sure that we address, like on our budget, that staff development is important. And because we do want to have our staff be able to have that experience and that knowledge to not only help the agency, but also their peers and our school districts.
Yeah. I mean, you guys sit on a gigantic freaking database. Really tired. Those folks are gonna stay up to hot cybersecurity. I don't even want to go there.
I have a question.
Frightening.
I have a question before you move on.
Yes.
And it's kind of related to 5 and 6 system standards around using data.
Mhm.
And a board always able to access data, and I'm talking generally, right? For continuous improvement, because sometimes when I see data sets, and especially when you have small population,
Mhm.
right, like, how do you know what's happening with those particular populations?
Yeah. When you can't even show the data.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough conversation. I'm looking at the superintendent. That's a hard conversation because we don't get to see the data. So then we say, how do we ensure the success of this group? There aren't good answers for that.
Other than, empathy interviews,
Mm-hmm.
particular population, but that is narrative and not or data, right? But it is narrative,
Right.
which is data in itself,
Okay.
but it's not what we would get from ODE with test scores or
Okay.
And the challenge is, you know, to your point, Denise, is smaller the population it is even more challenging to share, where last tip being to do in a public sphere like this is to be able to share data that is easily recognizable for just, you know, we know who those people are, you know, like that, you have to be really sensitive.
yeah, and very
that.
careful.
And then in the ESD see in our world, doing a lot of things that are indirect. It's also really difficult to see what the through line is in terms of, we do a lot of work when we look at our special education work in the K-12, on the K-12 side of things. We do a lot of work that's about access and finding the direct line to, okay, this particular kid that's successful or not successful in whatever data point is harder to see. I look at an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a speech language pathologist.
So your question is framed in the technical terms. What do we do? How do we deal with this data problem that we can't see this from? But I think from a governance standpoint, the most important piece is that you ask the question.
But it's about the dialogue that we have, absolutely. Even if we can't, and that's kind of been sort of my ethos around this, and in particular, since I have left building leadership. When I was a building principal, it was much more concrete. Like I could see, like I had reading tests, I had reading data, I had math data, I had science data, I had attendance data, I had behavioral data. I mean, it was all right there. And there was this direct line to something I did in the principal's office to what would happen for kids. And learning more about the ESD and looking at this and really understanding it's less concrete, but where the heart of the change happens in terms of the continuous improvement part, the second part of number 5 there, is about the conversation. How do we look? And so one of the things that we will do this year, because we typically do this every other year, is we will look at doing a satisfaction survey with our component school districts and looking at that data. That's important data for us in terms of, like perceived efficacy on the part of clients.
Yeah, we jump out. That stuff at administration and those districts are going all the way down to parents and students.
For the most part, it goes into like school staff, kind of where it goes. But one of the things that we have not done in the past, but I definitely want to add this year, is going down to the parents and students. In particular, if we can sort of farm the data from, for example, we connect with students and families through our evaluation centers. That's a direct linkage to families, and that we have email addresses. We have a way to be able to ask those questions of those families. And then EIECSE, where we actually do have relationships directly with them.
I think about especially data involving Black families, like the percentages so low,
Absolutely, yeah.
What's
Absolutely, yeah. And so in that, in my world, and how do I tap into that? One of the avenues I've done that as it relates to both number 5 and number 6 is tapping into the partnerships. So you mentioned partnerships. So, I'm a part of the regional racial equity group, and there are people that I connect with monthly that are in that group that do have those voices and are hearing from constituents in districts, and that sometimes can help inform me and decisions here. It's indirect.
It is.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know our time is going, but I think sometimes, if you only hear from certain families, right? Because if they don't feel as though they would speak to them, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Yeah, but anyway,
Yep.
yeah, I think,
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, for
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
I think the point is to keep having the conversation, and when you see the dash under a group of kids, not letting it go by, saying, why are we not seeing data there?
Yeah. What's the end on that box?
Right,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah.
how do we know? And following. Learning organization, we talked about that. Okay, and then the last set here, system thinking. And this is really about understanding that you are board for an education service district that is providing services to, many districts in the LBL region, but you're also within a system of ESDs in a state, a federal system of education. You get the idea, okay? Innovation and creativity. You are building the plane as you are flying it. You're doing something unprecedented, trying to reach each and every kid. So we're going to have to be innovative and creative to do this work. And that's going to require boards to be innovative and creative for doing system transformation. What we've been talking about all night, Standard 11, board member conduct, ethics, and relationship with the superintendent. How you work together as a team. We're talking about board governance. So we've been spending all our time talking about this. And the last one here is 12, which is, of course, financial, fiscal stewardship. 11 and 12 is the bread and butter. That's when we think about school or boarding. This is usually what most people think about. But you realize it's so much more. There's a lot to do here.
So for 11, would it be possible to say board member conduct, ethics, and relationship with each other and the superintendent?
Sure, yeah. So when we also have a board self-assessment tool, so this is something that I'm not trying to pitch you. I don't make commission on sales, so I can take it no matter what. But in the spring, after you've had some time to do this work, get comfortable with it a little bit, doing a board self-assessment, and you can measure yourself across all 12 of these standards, find where you're strong and where you have some work to do. And you can do that over time. We can show up to 4 years of data, so you can see your own growth. If you do that, we have you fill out a questionnaire, and then we also do goal setting, professional development.
Do we do that, Jason? Have we done our own board?
We've done our own in the past.
Yeah.
The board has done their own self-assessment, and what Vince is talking about is actually something that, as the whole scope of what we're doing in terms of professional development is something that I think could be valuable for us, particularly as a new emerging board.
Yeah.
And so it is something that I thought we would talk about during our retreat in February.
Okay. Keeps moving. I'm going to skip over data because it's a longer conversation, and I think that it's a conversation you should have with your superintendent. Board's role is you are going to be getting high-level data, so it's going to be roll-up data. We don't get to see individual sites. We don't get to track individual kids. It's, of course, focused on, district and regional progress, tied to district vision, mission, and goals. You should have vision, mission, and goals, and they should be top of mind and used for your decision-making. You should be making choices based on the data that you provide. And when I say data, I'm not just talking about quantitative data like test scores. I'm also talking about, qualitative data. So at best, quantitative data can only tell you half of what's going on with the population. I used to do social tomography for a living. I used to peddle data all the time. But you need qualitative information as well. What is the kiddo's experience? A little bit on research. So we have found remember community engagement, using data for accountability, and cultural responsiveness. Those are standards that are associated with changing how superintendents interact with staff. Transformational leadership is a style of leadership, executive leadership, and within that, one of the spokes of transformational leadership is inspirational motivation. We find that boards that score themselves high in community engagement, cultural responsiveness, and using data for accountability have executive leadership with higher levels of inspirational motivation in the district. Okay? So that's in Oregon. I would guess we could generalize that to, I would speculate, we didn't do it for the whole US, we only did it for Oregon. But my colleague Kristen Miles did this research and found this. So this does have impacts, and we don't know exactly the causal relationship, but when you're being community into your governance, being culturally responsive, and you're having hard conversations, being curious and asking why around your kids, that's inspiring and powerful. Those are really inspiring conversations, and that's why it has positive impacts.
So all three of those are a different aspect of listening.
Yes. Yeah.
Building trust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's another slide with this. Oh, this is what it looks like. So, but we can come back to it. I want to do scenarios because, and I want to get to your complaint question. So this is all, I'm going to put a scenario up and I'll read it and then you guys can play around with it, okay? So let's see, I forget what the first. Oh, during a recent board meeting, a board member rejected the proposed vision statement. We succeed when students thrive, all means all. They indicated that it was impossible for each student to achieve at a high level. Many, quote, many students do not have the supports at home necessary for them to be successful, said the board member. This is an impossible goal, should not be approved by the board. What do you think? Bill, you're laughing.
I had two kids in a youth group in a Portland church that were living from home to home because their mom was on the run from the FBI. And for a long period of time, they lived in the woods. And they did really well in school when they got to school. And so they were a real inspiration to me when I would have said, yeah, they're never going to make it. They were making sure they made it. So I needed to root for them too.
Mm.
It's revealing that the problem is the board members making excuses, like we're talking about, that's an ineffective quality in a board member. Instead of asking, what can we do to help bridge this gap? What are we doing, what could we be doing better to reach these families and to reach these students instead of putting the onus on the families? Instead of saying, hey, is it what we're doing this, like, how can we change this to bridge this gap and to make it better?
You're also saying that not all students deserve the, the level of achievement and success.
Yeah. What context did this conversation happen?
What was your question?
What is the context in which this happened?
During a strategic planning type of session.
It was a meeting of the board, right?
Yeah, and it was around the vision statement.
Okay.
I think
So-
that's some assumptions, though, that the board member is making and that there's some terms there that's probably.
What might be the impact?
Low
Okay.
expectations,
Okay.
Sure.
low improvement.
The tone from the top would sit down in a really mediocre way or
You're not going to achieve high levels of success if the people who are teaching you don't believe that you can achieve them.
I think the board member, though, has their own, notion of what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like having a conversation about what exactly does that, what exactly does.
this is also a vision statement, which means this is what's gonna go either in the school district level or in the agency level. This is one of those governing that is going to set the tone for the whole agency or school district. So when you have a disagreement on what that means, and it's going to, like I said, trickle down to the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, it's making, and kind of, like I was saying earlier, it's making also assumptions also about the problem is. Where is the, sorry, I'm tired and my brain is not working very well, after teaching today. Where is the disconnect? They're making an assumption of where are the barriers? They're making an assumption of where the barriers are, instead of asking, where are the barriers and how can we bridge them?
Good job, that's great.
Did we pass?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure.
This is a real scenario.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
2 years ago at Silver Board, we had a board member tell this story. They had this conversation. And what they related is that 2 days later, the board member had an interaction with some students that were watching.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid said, I thought they were talking about me. Wow.
I think the other thing that comes to mind for me, I appreciate everything that's shared here. But when you look at the first part of that quote, we succeed when students thrive. I think from a leadership lens, if you are unwilling to tie yourself and your own success as a leader to the success of the person or the persons that you are serving, then there is such a huge disconnect. There is no why, or the why is wrong, as far as I'm concerned. And I know that's when that's where it's just ripe for excuse. Like, it's not my fault. You know, I'm not tying my own success to them. You know, it just, the other part that comes to mind for me is it just creates the circumstances for othering.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
What I think about when I saw the scenario is, what if this was us, right? And we are having this, like we're looking at reviewing the vision statement, and one of us said this, like, how would we approach that? Because for me, I would never like to leave a meeting without like having that discussion, because I wouldn't want anyone, listening or who hears about this, to have questions around, how does the board feel about it?
And you remember at the beginning, I said, it's not if, it's when the storms will come.
Mm-hmm.
This is why that social capital is so important. Say, whoa, what do you mean? Director Ab, what, you need to explain that to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to keep moving because there's all kinds of good stuff. An ESD board member posts on Facebook asking for input on the quality of services provided by an ESD employed occupational therapist assigned to several component districts. She states that her nephew has had inconsistent support and wants to know if other families or districts are experiencing the same concerns. She makes herself available for questions by text, email, and social media. She then approaches the ESD superintendent with a compilation of complaints demanding immediate changes to staffing assignments. She also emails other ESD board members to gauge their views. Finally, she warns that if the superintendent doesn't address the issue, she will raise it publicly at the next ESD board meeting. Okay, before you dogpile this, I saw you all crouching, getting down.
Dogpile is so funny, yeah.
So, what's going well?
What's going
Well, that's what I said.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard the question.
For managing.
What's going well?
What's going well?
What's good here?
I mean, she's trying to reach the community. I mean, it's trying to.
We got some community engagement. We're being a little creative in social media, but thank you.
Yeah.
Checking in with her other board members. It's not the right.
Although there's some problems with that, we'll talk about, but, yeah. Is this in a public meeting yet?
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a bit of a pause when you look at the end, that it isn't being raised publicly right away.
Right?
I'm talking with the superintendent before I do this.
Yeah, so we thought,
There's a chance to be able to say, whoa.
it's not a complete train wreck.
But it's
Okay.
on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's already out there.
Oh, no, the bomb has exploded. Okay, what's problematic here?
Oh, it's on Facebook. No.
It's on Facebook.
It sounds like a vendetta. Like, I know she's trying to advocate for her family, but at the same time, she's trying to create a case or problem. And maybe there are issues that are happening in this ESD, but I feel like there's different ways to approach it. And she overstepped the governance, how to do that. Because there is that, level of complaint or how to do it, that staff, how to address issues like this, and they overstepped their governance and their role.
Advertising her positional power to the
Yes,
community about a staff
absolutely.
member at
Yeah.
the ESD.
Yeah.
Leveraging the power.
Yeah.
Yep.
In inappropriate ways.
Yeah, so she's putting herself out there as a board member,
Okay.
and so this is coming from the ESPN essentially.
Okay.
It either shows a lack of not following policy or a policy that should exist doesn't.
What about these, reaching out to her colleagues on the board? Oh,
There you go.
look at that, new board member's like, whoa, that's against the law.
Wow!
Yeah.
For today.
Yeah,
That's all good call.
That's illegal, we don't get to do that. Yeah, we don't want to deliberate, because it could be something that the board would make a decision on, so that would be deliberating. Good.
Is this a real scenario that happened?
This, not exactly,
Okay.
not directly. This one is kind of creative. But there's a lot, let's see, what other problematic things here?
It's the ending.
Is,
Yeah.
demanding, oh.
That is the president.
Overpromise.
How about this one? Then the superintendent with the complaint, demanding immediate changes to staffing.
Yeah.
Ooh, can we do that?
No.
Yeah, policy BBAA. No, I think it's I have a slide that says it, has the language. No individual board member can direct the superintendent action. Okay, good job. Oh, wait.
What if there is this situation, she's concerned about her nephew, was there a way that she could have done this?
How would you navigate this? You have a nephew, say, and I mean nephew, that's kind of a little tangential, but say that this board member has guardianship, so you're the guardian. Yeah, right.
I think what will happen and
What's the right way?
what's the right way is approaching the superintendent about what your concern is, especially if it is within the agency that you are governing. So addressing it to the superintendent, so the superintendent can then do the investigation or follow through with what is being indicated, because you as a board member don't want to do it. You're just like, hey, I noticed this happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first step is we always want to resolve at the lowest possible level. So it would be to go to the OT and say, hey, what's going on, and try to deal with it that way.
Should we go to the OT?
Yeah, if you're the guardian.
Well, I
So-
Yeah, okay.
Before I would do that, I would give the high sign to my superintendent. So that's when you reach out to the superintendent and say, and I've actually navigated this, I had to go have a conference with, this was middle school. Yeah, and had to have a tough conversation with the teacher, ended up going great, but I mean, I let Ryan know ahead of time that I was going in hot. And just give him just as a courtesy. And of course I said, I'm here as a parent, not a school board member. And then we had a really lovely conversation and it all worked out. But in this situation, you let the superintendent know, hey, I got this problem with the OT, go talk to the OT. That doesn't work out. OT works for somebody, right? Talk to that person. Up you go.
Exactly. Yeah, I think if this were something that you had something like this, definitely let me know and then work through the levels, you know, because probably would not be surprised to know that it just takes much and all of a sudden it's gonna turn into a big thing. It's like, this board member just came and, you know, talked directly to me, and it's easier if I would know about that, even if I'm not doing anything about it right now, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, and then work through, and the other part of this, you know, in the way that we do things is that, a lot of times, the occupational therapist, so if we really looked at it through like an actual OT, it really would actually go through the school district before it even got to us. Because that OT is basically being a consultant to an IEP team. And so, you know, what I would say to you, if that was your child, I would say, start with your child's case manager, work through the IEP process, talk to the school district, let the complaint process go up to us from the school district. And then it would provide, this is where I can help provide protection to you in your other roles as well, to be able to say, hey, like you're being a parent right now, and you're not being a board member right now in this particular thing, and that's how it would work in our region.
And I was gonna say, and that's what I've actually done, I've contacted Jason, you know, on situations I have a right to like, hey, this is the situation, but I am coming in as a parent.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, and I remember one of the times we talked about that, you asked too,
Yeah.
what do you think I should do? And then we can have a conversation about, you know, here's what I would do.
Two things. Superintendent's the chief advisor to the board. He's your best buddy. The other is we always go together, we never go alone. This member has gone rogue on their own.
Yeah.
And it always causes problems. And if you do get into a sideways situation, it does happen. You shoot our mouth off in public. Then you go back and you come together, go to your superintendent, go to your chair, and work together to navigate that. Don't run away. Go back. I want to get to complaints. Oh, meanwhile, we talked about that. I'm going to skip that. You can meet in executive session for a lot of different reasons. I didn't design this slide.
One of the lawyers is like, here's all the info.
Here are all the reasons.
Every one of the call-outs from
ORS.
So, the main thing here is, if you have any questions about it, pick up the phone and call us. I mean, literally, just go. I mean, I'm just right.
How do you speed dial? Okay.
I mean, yeah, just feel free to call if you have any questions about executive session.
But I would say, for all of you, and my advice to you would be, start with Lisa, because Lisa absolutely knows this stuff. You can talk to me, and if there's something that we need more consultation, we can call OSBA together and we can talk about it. And my biggest advice that I've seen over the years with it is the most important thing is to stay on topic. If you go into, all you have to do is you pick one of those. If you go into executive session for one reason, you know, let's say the reason is to evaluate me, you know, you don't start talking about something else. It's like you went into executive session for this reason, stay on topic.
Right.
It's when boards go off topic, that's how you end up in front of OGAC, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission.
And in the newspaper too. Okay, so we were talking about complaints, so I want to talk about complaints. Oh, and then this is policy BBAA. So you're going to spend a lot of time looking, new board members, you should read your B section of your policies first. So BBAA is one of the important ones, individual board member authority. The individual board member exercises their authority and responsibility of their position when the board is in legal session only, and no individual board member may direct the superintendent to action without board authorization. Board members will not intervene in the administration of the district or its schools. They have authority here. Y'all could take up a motion and like vote on it if you want it.
Excuse me, can you go back before this part? Yeah, right there. So that means when we go to a school board meeting for our districts that we represent, we are going to those as a listener and as a representative, but we are not, we have no authority and we have no responsibility to answer questions. We can take questions and then we can hand them over.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're not.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think, so kind of like the simple, you know, if you look at the soundbite, so, you know, the soundbite for, executive session that I would always say is stay on topic. You know, the soundbite for that would be, don't overpromise.
Yeah.
In fact, don't promise anything.
Right.
Just
Nothing.
listen,
Yep.
and because there is not a thing that you can do individually. So you can take the information, you can bring it back, you can talk about it, but it's when somebody promises something, oh, we will, don't worry, we will take care of this. That seems like, then, it doesn't go well. So you're right on, Lori.
Yeah, you can relate positions that the board has already taken. Anything you voted on, you can say, yeah, we approve that. That sort of thing. Wonderful, thank you. Paul, yeah. In our scenario, remember this Facebook one? Policy BBF, down at the bottom of this policy, there's some stuff around social media, judicious use of social media. So we probably violated policy BBF. This is board's best friend. Board member standards of conduct. So yeah, and every board has their own version of this because it's an accumulation of the traumas that the board has gone through, how these policies occur. All right, public complaints. So let's talk about this really quick because Denise brought it up for us. So when does the board hear complaints? There are 4 instances.
When it has gone through the proper channels from starting from bottom. We should be the last complaint.
So complaints on appeal?
Yes.
Yeah. 3 more.
Against superintendent?
Yep, good. See, what do we got? We got complaints on appeal. Well, let's do this one first. Complaints on appeal, so it says right in the policy, if the claim is dissatisfied with the superintendent's and these findings, they can appeal. Okay, it's in the policy, right? So, yes, it's, step 4 in this policy, or the AR. So, so this one, we have a policy KL. Policy KL isn't very long, it's only like a page long. It just says, the district will have public complaint process. The AR, on the other hand, is voluminous, it's huge, and it gives you all the procedures for doing that. KL AR1 is where the rubber meets the road. So this is, on appeal, step 3, sorry, step 4. Okay? So when the complaints against the superintendent, so we got that one. Complaints against a board member.
Yeah.
This last one.
Yeah.
Board.
That makes sense.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about complaints. Now this is, I'm not talking about people just kind of talking. We're talking about something that is moving towards what might be a formal complaint, where someone's going to get policy KL and actually file a formal, not just grousing. Okay? So, complaints about conversations, how do we navigate that? Well, the first thing we want to do, we want to honor that conversation. Something's going on with a kid, and I'm fired up, and yeah, so we want to be empathetic in that situation. Say it again?
So if a parent, and this is, like general, want to talk about something that's happening, board members, you can meet with, is that what that says?
Not only can you, it will happen. It's gonna happen. The people are going to reach out to you, and they're gonna have something going on with the kid.
Okay.
it's not if, it's when. So, yeah, you want to avoid hearing details about a potential complaint. You develop this spider sense. I don't know, there's a point where you're gonna need to stop them, and it's hard to do, and you're gonna have to practice saying something kind of like this. I need to stop you there, because under district policy, I may hear your complaint on appeal, and I want to fulfill that duty for you. So, and then you can go on and provide ombuds style of guidance on how to navigate the process. So that's.
So how do you differentiate the conversation? Like, let's say they're having the conversation, but then they automatically, like, they go into the details until you realize, it's like, oh snap, this is details of the complaint, now it's too late. So like,
So then, yeah,
you know, that's where I feel like it would be hard.
It
Because
is.
you already heard some of it, and you didn't recognize it until it was too late in, so you're like, well, shoot, what do I do now?
So if you get in too deep, then you may have to recuse yourself. But you want to have that in the back of your head. I don't want to have to recuse myself. So really, the whole point here is that we're kind of out of lane. The parent thinks you have a magic wand and that you can go, bing, and fix this situation. The reality is, school board members, we don't have them, but superintendents do.
So, I will say, just to kind of clarify, I've definitely had conversations with school district members, and they're very clear from the onset. If you give me details, I will have to, exclude myself.
Good.
But I've also had where, I'm like, this is I'm not trying to file anything here. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to hear this, just in case. And that's what I mean, like, how do you, as a board member, be receptive to honoring the conversation, instead of assuming that this person is gonna go into, like, yeah.
So then how do
Stay
you
with me.
differentiate the conversation from the complaint?
Yeah, so the next piece here is, so this is, you understand this concept, ex parte communication. You don't want to have more information than you need.
Yeah.
So moving on to direct them to resources, that's where you pivot to. Did you talk to the teacher? Well, I haven't talked to the teacher yet. You need to go talk to the teacher and explain the policy process. So you shift the conversation and you're acting as an ombudsman at that point. You're not hearing any more detail, you're now moving towards action, okay? So you're gonna direct them to resources, teacher, so they have so we're always trying to resolve at the lowest possible level, teacher, principal, and I don't know in ESD where this looks like, and you may not know. You can say, I'm not sure where to direct you, but I'm gonna follow up with my superintendent, and let the superintendent know. This is on, you'll notice it's on both sides. There's no slide after this one, okay? You let the superintendent know, because he does have a magic wand. He's got this amazing staff, and he can get those resources on the kid. Board members, we can't do that. But we can act as the eyes and ears of the superintendent. He's just one guy. He can't be everywhere at once, but he's got the 7 of you to be out in community, meeting with parents and with other board members, funneling information to him so then he can allocate resources.
What if it's a parent reaches out to you, but it's not the ESD, but it's a component school district, and they know you because, like, oh, you're a school board member, but I'm having this issue at this.
Education leader.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like in situations like that, like I direct them to the policy to follow the procedure.
I would you could do a warm handoff to the board chair. Hand them off to the board chair.
To the board chair of the ESD or to that board chair of that component
Of
district?
that component district.
Okay.
And then they'll do this protocol.
Okay.
I
And then,
think I'm still going to honor the conversation.
I think it's really about empathy. But there's gonna be a point where you're gonna get too much detail. And you just, every conversation's different. I wish I could be more definitive.
Maybe I can provide a little bit of insight, Denise, is that I think the way that I would look at this is that I wouldn't put a particular time limit or a particular amount of information that would be a standard for what the word honor means. Like, you can honor the conversation and have the conversation be very short. You could basically say, oh my gosh, thank you, like, this seems problematic. Thank you for coming to me. Have you talked to the teacher? Have you, and be able to say, avoid hearing the details, and be able to say, wow, I might be a decision maker in this, so I need to make sure I don't hear the details of this, but I can help you get to the resources, and I can let my superintendent know, and my superintendent can be able to, help you get to the resources. And so that's where I would look at, you can have a great deal of empathy and you can really honor the conversation very quickly.
Yes.
And I did this all the time as a building principal. Honestly, that's the place where you first learn it, and building principals, as Lori well knows, get very tripped up very quickly when they don't direct parents back to their teachers. Their teachers get very frustrated with them if they just try to solve the thing without
And then they
directing
spend
them
all
back.
their time solving problems that aren't even theirs.
Exactly.
Yep.
So what if the parent says, I don't want you to let the superintendent, I just want you to hear my problem?
Well, I think I would go back to, again,
The policy.
direct them to the policy, direct them, and still say, like, if I'm going to be a decision maker in this at any time, because of this policy, you can show them the policy, I really should not hear any of this, and it's not because I don't care, actually because I care, that I need to follow the policy.
Exactly.
Because it's that line between honoring and having people feel like you don't want to say things, right?
Yeah.
Because I know for sure I've been in situations where, honestly, I just wanted to share with someone, but have felt shut down because they're like, talk to this, talk to this. I've already done that, I just want to tell you, and you could, you know what I mean? So that fine line
But-
between honoring versus,
But Denise,
without really providing details.
but Denise, the operative point is, you said, I just want to tell you, and then it's this piece. There's no board work here.
Right.
The board work may come later on appeal,
Mhm.
but there's nothing for the board member to do. The only thing that they can do, communicate. The only role that we have.
So, I'll give you an example. So when I was campaigning, I'll make it short. When I was campaigning, I had like parents just approach me because, of course, they don't realize I'm a CSP. They think I'm a board member for some of the school district, right? And really, they just wanted to share their story. They didn't expect me to do anything, And that I felt like they were just trying to connect, and that was
And what I would say, Denise, in that is that I think there's a way to be empathetic, and I think that seems very authentic, like they are sharing their story with you as a candidate. And I think the shift happens when you're not a candidate anymore, and now you're a board director.
Yeah.
And there's power. Once there is a position of power, then you have to, and I don't know, this doesn't necessarily sound like the most gracious thing, but I think that you have to have some level of assumption that there isn't just sharing of a story anymore, that they might actually want. They're sharing a story for a purpose, and if you're in a position of power, it's pretty much always the case I've seen where somebody's sharing the story. Otherwise, they could share the story to somebody that doesn't have a position of power. You could say, I think it'd be really great, I actually have this resource of somebody you could talk to. you know, and if they don't want to talk to that person, they want to talk to you, they're talking to you because they hope that you're going to do something. And that's, I think that's where I see the distinction there.
Okay.
You know, it's a little bit different, yeah.
You know, also, what's at play here is you may be talking about something that's more generalizable, it may be a broader, more of a policy issue, but only you're hearing it. And you have 6 of your colleagues that do not. And so, always be thinking of, where is the board work here? And if there's no board work, you probably don't have a role. However, if you're hearing complaints about something around curriculum or program or something like that, there may be board work, and you have to be thinking, how do I get this into a process for my whole board? So we're kind of in the nuance.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. I have a team of 4 consultants that can support. If you ever get in these situations, pick up the phone and call. That's why we come to work every day.
And you're absolutely asking the right question. This is where it gets very complicated.
It is now 9:03, so I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to yield back to the chair. I have a whole raft of more slides, but, actually, I am going to jump to the, oh, man, I can't jump to the end. I'm just going to blank my screen. No, can I do that? Oh, didn't. Don't do that. Don't look at that stuff.
For another day. Yeah.
We can talk about more complaints. So, we have organized additional training, so we haven't scheduled it yet. I'm trying to remember what the next one is. It is ethics.
We were talking about ethics. We had a thing about budget.
Yeah,
We kind
finance,
of picked some of the big ones.
budget, finance, and then effective meetings or something like that. So how to get the most out of your meetings. And then we also were talking about equity, how to operationalize equity. And I'm totally intrigued to dive into that, particularly in the context of done.
Have you looked at our equity one?
No, I haven't, but I will.
I have a copy you can take with you.
Is it cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Basic.
Good. I like equity ones.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're really cool.
Great, well, thank you. We do have, you know, to figure out the scope of when we meet next. We were going to spread these out. So, you know, we might have another couple months go by or whatever before we do the next one. One of the things that I looked at, through the learning side, like looking at this in a learning and a pedagogical sort of sense, is that, especially for new board members, there's a lot to take in, and you're not going to learn it all at once, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, we can have a longer trajectory for our learning and our team development.
Yeah, if the only things you took away were 100% and informed oversight, that's.
So since the training for the budget and finance, is that going to be somewhat tailored to the ESD?
Ooh, yeah, I am gonna have to,
Okay.
well, you know, the reality is that the board's role in finance, I mean, we can get into the weeds, and I probably need to talk to your CFO a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm actually thinking, is that maybe when we get to that and develop that, that you and Rocco and I could get together and we could talk about what that session looks like.
Yeah.
Because I think there'd be aspects that you would talk about that are very general, and then we can also have the very ESD specific things and yeah.
Yeah, I'll really talk about the board's role from a governance standpoint and an oversight standpoint, but then I would love to get into the weeds and what does that reporting look like and what does the budget look like.
Absolutely. And I know Rocco, for those of you that are new, Rocco really is truly brilliant about taking something very complicated and scoping it into something that's really manageable to understand. So I think that could be really valuable.
That's what I was thinking and hoping is that, you know, getting this information that's more ESD specific and not so generalized school districts, because we have essentially a different budget than school districts.
It's much more complicated.
Yeah.
But the principles of oversight
They're the
are
same.
really universal.
I want to cut anyone off, but I also want to honor people's time. So we just have a couple more important dates, which is just our next two regular board meetings on September 16th and October 20th. Next one's coming up in a couple of weeks, and then the only additional thing on here is Tuesday, October 23rd, the OSBA Fall Regional Road Show, which should be informative. And so those are usually it's for all of our surrounding districts, so all the boards will be invited.
It's a great time for you to meet, for those of you that are new, to meet other board members from our component districts. It's usually a room of about, I don't know, 50 to 60 people.
All three of these
We
rooms.
fill all of
Remember.
them.
All of the, that's here.
It's here.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. And then, all right, we will go ahead and adjourn at 9:07.
Good.
Thank you.